And you know, some of you have been asking, where is Reading Rhaegar? I haven't seen him in a while. And friends, I got bad news. Reading Rhaegar, I've been lying to you guys for months. He got stuck in the Weirwood net. He heard me talking about it, and he figured out. He claims anyway. I've not seen him, and he sends me cryptic messages in dreams only, and he claims to be in the Weirwood net. So hopefully we'll figure out a way to get him out of there. But the topic of today's stream, of course, is the Rhoynar and the Dornish and everything in between. So origins of the Rhoynar, migration to Dorne. We've got Captain Nymeria Martell to guide us on our voyage. Thank you, Nymeria, for joining us.
Yes, I am Captain Nymeria Martell of the Disgruntled Sun, and today we are sailing away, set an open path away from the Rhoyne.
Disgruntled Sun, you got me with that one. He's disgruntled. He's got a spear through his gut. Yeah. He's wise.
Because we gotta be free. Can't live under Valyrian slavery.
You sound like you've got a whole jukebox. Not jukebox. What am I saying? Karaoke Mad Libs performance. Yeah.
Yeah, assuming we can't sing too many lyrics, or otherwise YouTube will hit a copyright claim.
Thank you, Alyssa, and also other people who are seeing my mustache for the first time. Yes, it is in my blood. I have many uncles, and my dad rocked a mustache for years. I've been avoiding it. I've been avoiding my true calling. The beard is much easier. You just sort of beard trimmer it, and it's done. And but I have elevated now to mustache level, and apparently this is my final form. So I am a couple days unshaven to mimic the look of the British colonists who settled the lost colony of Roanoke, which we'll hear about. And I always mention Roanoke, but I'm going to give you the actual story with names and grisly details. Similarly, we've got every influence that I could find, basically. There's Lovecraftian ideas for Greyscale, which we'll talk about when we get to that part of the war against the Valyrians. Burning of the ships inspiration I found from the Tuatha Dé of Irish folklore. And we've got the Roanoke info. We've got some stuff about MC Hammer Charles Martell, the hammer from Frankish history. And we've also got Battle of Tours here. Othello. This is the watch for near the end of the stream, and you're going to get some bonus Tim Shakespearean Dornish inspiration from Othello, which will build on some of the other history that we're going to explain here. We're going to talk about the Moors and all kind of stuff. So it'll be a nice little comprehensive journey through Rhoynish and Dornish history with little augments from some of the most obvious places that George has drawn from to create these civilizations. And so, real quick, I just wanted to handle business. Tim is obviously good enough to share all of his time with us almost every Sunday, probably 2 or 3 Sundays out of the month. I do occasionally compensate him through means which are too indecent to talk about on the internet. But there is compensation going on. But the point is, Tim, we appreciate you, and as a sign of our appreciation, everyone in the chat and watching right now is going to go over to your channel and make sure they're subscribed and click the notification bell, because you are cooking up some Tim foil over there to be released next week, which nobody is going to want to miss.
Yes, I finished recording and am now editing my next video, which don't have a set date for it, but it's going to be out sometime before next Sunday, because it's going to be in preparation for the stream that we're going to do next Sunday about Bloodstone Emperor.
That's right. The Bloodstone Emperor. We're going to get down to the idea not only who is the Bloodstone Emperor, but we're going to grapple with the topic I've been avoiding for years, which is, was he a Green Seer? Were the Great Empire of the Dawn people Green Seers? What's going on with that? So we're going to tackle, it's going to be like Bloodstone Emperor, Green Seer, iceberg type presentation. We're going to go deep, start simple and go deep. So that's next week. And Tim's going to prep us with a even deeper, well, it's going to focus on the Nephrin Ka stuff, right?
Yes, because Nephrin Ka, the Black Pharaoh, is also a god king who worships a black stone that fell from space. And his story and Bloodstone Emperor's story are beat for beat the same. You basically just replace the word pharaoh with emperor and Egypt with Great Empire of the Dawn, and they line up basically pretty much exactly the same. So my belief is that since we don't know exactly what happened to Bloodstone Emperor, we can at least make an educated guess. We can start to infer what happened after the downfall by tracing the story of Nephrin Ka, who we do get a conclusion for in the works of Lovecraft and Robert Bloch. You're muted.
And then we'll also talk about Numenor and Ar-Pharazôn. We'll edit that out in post. But yeah, some other stuff. So that'll be for next week. Big Bloodstone Emperor stream coming next week. And you're going to want to watch Tim's video before then, so make sure you're subbed. And then the other thing I will say is that, surprise, I actually put out a video on my channel a couple days ago. A lot of you may not have seen it because for some reason, YouTube censored it as if it was some sort of controversial political video. It wasn't. It was just about Direwolf Net and the Raven Net and psychic wolves and ravens having their own hive mind and means of psychic communication. Thank you for those of you who watched it. But yeah, it was suppressed by the algorithm gods. I angered them apparently by doing something different last Sunday. I don't know. But the good news for you is that if you missed it, you've got that video waiting for you after the stream. It's a nice little 45 minutes about psychic wolves. And who doesn't want to, I mean, if you're not looking for psychic wolf content, then you're not really, I don't know what Ice and Fire content you're looking for. So I'll just say that. And yeah, let's see here. We're not starting with Lovecraft and Greyscale. We're starting with the 10,000 ships. And this will actually just be the World of Ice and Fire section on the history of the Rhoynish.
Yeah.
And yes, Tim, don't strain your eyes on our account, although that did look cool.
But yeah, we'll get to it when the story of Garin the Great comes up.
Is it like the Medusa, where if you don't look at the Green Garin, you won't get Greyscale?
Sort of. I mean, once it becomes relevant, we'll talk about Garin and Gotten. That's how I'm going to dub them, because they both have a stone curse.
JD, I'm not sure what we're asking for. Is this sounds like a Sacramento Mythhead meetup where we listen to the Deftones? Or do you want symbolism of the Deftones? I'm not sure. Yes, I'd love to do, how I feel about the Deftones. But yeah, let me get some clarification on that. If we had a hangout, which we'll eventually start doing, we want to do, man, I've got all kinds of things planned. I want to do con and all kinds of stuff, but yeah. Anyways, I got to get people to watch my Direwolf Net video first. So it's brick by brick. That's how we build it. But Tim, let's go ahead and get started with this stream. Would you do us the honor of starting the reading?
Sure. 10,000 ships. The last of the great migrations into Westeros happened long after the coming of the first men in the Andals. Once the Giscari Wars had ended, the Dragon Lords of Valyria turned their gaze toward the west, where the growth of Valyrian power brought the Freehold and its colonies into conflict with the peoples of the Rhoyne. The mightiest river in the world, the Rhoyne's many tributaries sketched across much of western Essos. Along their banks had arisen a civilization and cultured as storied and ancient as the old empire of Gis. The Rhoynar had grown rich off the bounty of the river, Mother Rhoyne, they named her.
And just real quick, Tim, as I considered sort of historical inspirations for the Rhoynar itself.
Mhm.
There's, it's a little bit of Indus Valley, it's a little bit of Egyptian
Mhm.
River Nile civilization. There's nothing specifically to call out to any of it. Once they move into Westeros, then we're
Yeah.
building on a lot of history that we can identify. But the Rhoynish themselves are basically akin to any of the world's oldest. I should mention the earliest Chinese civilizations on the Yellow River too. Most
Yeah.
of the first civilizations, quote unquote, Fertile Crescent, Sumerian Empire, they're
Yeah.
along
Before.
river valleys, and so the Rhoynish and the Sarnori both arose along great rivers. And their cities kind of ran along them. So you can compare them to any of those. There's nothing specific enough to say, oh, well, this is George's version of the Egyptians. Like, there's no Cleopatra. We're not told about. I mean, the pyramids are in Slaver's Bay, right? So
Mhm.
it's not, and Slaver's Bay isn't really much like Egypt. It just has pyramids and there's desert. But other than that, so this is. I don't really feel like the Rhoynish themselves have a good one-to-one inspiration. But like I said, once they get moving, then there's a
Mhm.
bunch of stuff that we'll talk about. If
Yeah.
anybody has any sort of specific things that I missed, but as we read through the description of the Rhoynish, like I said, it reminds me of Indus Valley a little bit in that they're not really trying to conquer other people. They're mostly happy to trade and kind of just grow wealthy and live fabulously, and the weather's warm, you know. But yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Fishers, traders, teachers, scholars, workers in wood and stone and metal, they raised their elegant towns and cities from the headwaters of the Rhoyne down to her mouth, each lovelier than the last. There was Goyen Dra in the Velvet Hills, with its groves and waterfalls, Nysar, the city of fountains, alive with song, Arnoy on the coin, with its halls of green marble, Pale Sarmel of the flowers, Seagirt Sarhoy with its canals and saltwater gardens, and Chroyane, greatest of all, the festival city with its great palace of love. Art and music flourished in the cities of the Rhoyne, and it is said their people had their own magic. A water magic very different from the sorceries of Valyria, which were woven of blood and fire. Though united by blood and culture, and the river that had given them birth, the Rhoynish cities were elsewise fiercely independent, each with its own prince or princess, for amongst these river folk, women were regarded as the equals of men.
And I've just got there's just a couple of pieces of art. Most of the art of the Rhoynar is the ruined Chroyane as the sorrows, because that's what Tyrion and everybody goes through. But here is, and I'll even just shrink I'll shrink us for the moment so we
Mm-hmm.
can see more of this beautiful art. This is from Falk Boje, and I use this for the cover. So you can see the good Rhoynish citizens here. There is they did put obelisks in. That's not described in artistic license. I approve, but it's not, just a little bit of liberty taken. So there's the bridge. So this is the Bridge of Dream that gets ruined that Tyrion sails down. So that's the imagined whole version of it for all the grayscale. And there's also one, I think I've got Sarmel as well. But yeah, it's not under Rhoynar, it's under Sarmel. Here we go. Yeah, and this is by Benjamin Schulte. So this is giving you the fishermen of the river vibes and the hill countries of Andalos in the background, perhaps, because you see the upper, and I guess I'll get the map too. Thank you, whoever sent in that PayPal. And this is, so you can see that like the upper reaches of the rivers, the Little Rhoyne and the Darkwash and the Noin, they're coming out of
Mm-hmm.
the hills. So this is supposed to be Sarmel, but this could be any of these Rhoynish cities where you can see the hills in the background. And really, the climate is really different up here. It's pretty cold. We know Norvos, Qohor, it's a good bit colder. Down here, it starts getting a little tropical past Dagger Lake. It starts just feeling like, southern Essos, Mediterranean climate. And so you get all the way down to Sarmel and Sarhoy, which is by Volantis. So this map is by Wordhead, as is the Rhoynish migration map that I will show you in a minute. All right, where did you leave off, Tim?
Women were regarded as the equals of men.
Well, that sounds cool, doesn't it? It's refreshing, and this...
Yeah, no male primogeniture inheritance goes to the eldest child, regardless of sex or gender.
Right, and of course we know that tradition carries on in Dorne, so we're pretty familiar with that. Go ahead.
By and large, a peaceful people, the Rhoynar could be formidable when roused to wrath, as many a would-be Andal conqueror learned to his sorrow. The Rhoynish warrior with his silver-scaled armor, fish head helm, tall spear, and turtle shell shield was esteemed and feared by all those who faced him in battle. So in armor, he's a squisher. It was said that Mother Rhoyne herself whispered to her children of every threat, that the Rhoynar princes wielded strange, uncanny powers, that Rhoynish women fought as fiercely as Rhoynish men, and that their cities were protected by watery walls that would rise to drown any foe. For many centuries, the Rhoynar lived in peace.
So let's stop there, Tim. Let's go ahead and give the people what they want. We're gonna, we see water magic against the Valyrians when they go to war with them. Apparently, they're raising water spouts. Slam the dragons in the belly, put out their fires. Kind of makes sense. Walls of water, so they can manipulate the water. They can water bend it. Essentially, it sounds like. What do you think about the all the fish armor? Because we know as we look around Ice and Fire on the coastline, it really seems like George is sketching out an ancient world where interactions with the Deep Ones and Merlings gave rise to a lot of mythology and religion focused on the shoreline and the water, and it's kind of tied to these places where we might see hybrid people and stuff. Now, these Rhoynish are really a river civilization, and they're worshiping the turtle and stuff. So a lot of that is different. This could just be culture happening because they like turtles and live on the river and all that. Is there have we talked before about the idea that there are freshwater and saltwater aquatic beings?
It has come up before. When we talk about Lovecraft's Deep Ones and their travels, normally it's in saltwater. Normally they live in the deep ocean, but in order to reach places like Egypt, in order to get things like Blackstone or get it there or retrieve it after it's caused its havoc, means having to wade into fresh water because you need a route. But it's also why they won't stay long in places like that. A fish in the desert is no place for a fish man. But here, yeah, so anytime that George brings up any kind of fish or amphibian or water aquatic reptile like turtles, then I do think he is trying to invoke a sort of squisher imagery. Also, George also just really loves turtles. He had pet turtles when he was a kid. He wears that turtle pin medallion, whatever it is on.
And then he became a Grateful Dead fan, and they're all about turtles and Terrapin Station and stuff. So he's got a lot of reasons to like turtles. I realized this when I was reading the story about his little turtle battles and how his first fantasy stories as a child were written about his turtles. And then he became a Dead fan, and it's like turtles. So yes, the turtle is a god.
And he's a comic nerd, so he probably likes the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, which actually, I honestly would like to hear George's opinion on that one. I just assume that he likes TMNT.
I hadn't thought about that. Is there a Shredder analog somewhere?
Somewhere.
A rat with a bunch of knives or something. I don't. Okay, yeah, I don't know about that one. All right, yeah. You know what would have been funny is if they had talked about the Rhoynish painting frescoes on their domes.
Oh yeah.
We could have connected it to Michelangelo. They worship
if
turtles,
we
but
yeah,
no.
if we ever had like a Leonardo Martell or
Yeah,
someone
no.
in
I
some
think
Dornish
it's those
family.
two things. I think it's his pet turtles and the Grateful
Mhm.
Dead mostly. So yeah, could the Rhoynish have begun near one of the coastlines and then like the proto Rhoynish?
Yeah.
Seems like they
I mean,
started in the north and then moved south to
yeah.
me.
I mean, where we're at the Rhoyne is we are on the western edges of what would have been the Silver Sea before it receded and turned into the Dothraki Sea. So this could be remnants of the old realm of the Fisher Queens before the tides receded and the giant inland ocean became grassland.
Yeah, it could be. I've wondered about that too. Like, is there some sort of connection between the Silver Sea aquatic ideas, which would be freshwater, inland sea, and then this Rhoynish culture? But the would have to go back so far, Tim. And there's really nothing telling us that the Rhoynish came from that area. The only connection is the metalworking of the Cimeri, but there's not really a clue to link that to the Rhoynar, is there?
Well, there is the
Because the
in the
Silver Sea is all the way
Andal.
over here. The Rhoynar are all the way over here. Now we know the Andals, or we don't know, but it's implied the Andals may have moved from this area to this area. But the Rhoynish were already there when they moved from the Axe into Andalos. So,
Hmm. I guess it depends on how exactly how far the Silver Sea stretched before it started to recede.
oh no, we know that. There's a third lake that's supposed to be right here by these other two. It's not huge like Amanda thought at one point. It's right
Uh,
here. In fact, I can show you. I mocked it up. Silver Sea modified map incoming. I made this for my second Dothraki video that's coming out sometime soonish. So this is filled in. Okay. So if we go to
hmm.
this is me modifying a map and filling in the area between the three lakes. So that's about how big it would have been. This is the original map. And this is also from Adam Whitehead, Atlas of Ice and Fire. So this was a mistake on the Lands of Ice and Fire, the map book. It should have looked like this, but they only drew in two, which led Amanda to speculate that the third might have been the womb of the world, which would make the lake, huge. But it wasn't. It was these three lakes. And so when you fill those in, you get something that looks like this, which is pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look like, it's big. Much bigger than the womb of the world. It would be the biggest sea, I think, inland sea anywhere. So, in any case, put that one down. I'll leave this one handy in case I need to grab it. And yeah, they do seem like a pre-long night civilization. At least, the beginnings of their civilization must have been getting going. Their ancestors have memories of the long night, of living through it. We know that. Okay, go ahead and pick it up. Where we're Watery Walls, next page. For centuries, the Rhoynar lived in peace.
Though many a savage people dwelt in the hills and the forests around Mother Rhoyne, all knew better than to molest the river folk. And the Rhoynar themselves showed little interest in expansion. The river was their home, their mother, and their god, and few of them wished to dwell beyond the sound of her eternal song. when adventurers, exiles, and traders from the freehold of Valyria began to expand beyond the lands of the Long Summer in the centuries after the fall of the old empire of Gis, the Rhoynish princes embraced them at first, and their priests declared that all men were welcome to share the bounty of Mother Rhoyne. As those first Valyrian outposts grew into towns, and those towns into cities, however, some Rhoynar came to regret the forbearance of their fathers. Amity gave way to enmity, particularly upon the lower river, where the ancient city of Sarmel and the walled Valyrian town Volin Terrace faced each other across the waters, and on the shores of the Summer Sea, where the free city of Atlantis soon rivaled the storied port of Sarhoy, each of them commanding one of Mother Rhoyne's 4 mouths. Disputes between the citizens of the rival cities became ever more common and ever more rancorous, finally giving birth to a series of short but bloody wars. Sarmel and Volin Terrace were the first cities to meet in battle. Legend claims that the clash began when the Valyrians netted and butchered one of the gigantic turtles the Rhoynar called the Old Men of the River, and held sacred as the...
That's just abomination.
Yeah.
Slaughtering Sorry, Tim, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, killing the sacred giant turtles. See, and held
it's
sacred.
On. Like, it's on. There's no turning back now. We must fight. Like, that is, throwing down the gauntlet. That's all I'm trying to say.
It's like, here's the line. We were fine with you coming in. We were fine with you building your outpost. Hell, we even dealt with them. We even dealt with this new city going up. But you hurt the turtles and you crossed the line.
It's on. Like, it's on.
It's on.
And there, yeah. So this is what you get for being nice to the Valyrians. Like they literally were doing nothing wrong. The Rhoynish, they're like, yeah, we can cohabitate with you along the same river. It's chill. Like, the Valyrians suck. Anyway.
Yeah. Just don't hurt the wee baby turtles. The Old Men of the River held sacred as the consorts of Mother Rhoyne herself. The first Turtle War lasted less than a moon's turn. Sarmel was raided and burned, yet emerged victorious when Rhoynish water wizards called up the power of the river and flooded Volin Terrace. Half the city was washed away, if the tales can be believed. Other wars followed, however. The War of Three Princes, the Second Turtle War, so I guess they did it again. The fishermen. How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
I never realized that all the turtle wars are called that because they butchered turtle.
The Fishermen's War, the Salt War, the Third Turtle War, the war. At that point, they're just doing it on purpose, right? Like, you should know. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Do this a third time, you're just being a jackass now.
I was wondering if maybe the Rhoynish actually used the turtles in some way, but that probably would have been recorded,
Yeah. I think they just really, really like the turtles and they're like, look, we're cool with you fishing. We're cool with you hunting. We just don't want you, just leave this one specific animal alone. I mean, we're not poking your dragons with a stick. You can leave our turtles alone.
We have a Girl Nettles sighting, as well as Talk Studios. What's up, Talk? Northern Tommy. Girl Nettles, yeah. If you're not busy and you want to join in, man, just let me know. I mean, it's the same old link. Sorry I did not. If you feel a certain way. Otherwise, you're welcome to come on any other time. But yeah, Girl Nettles is busy, so I try not to bug her too much. Tim, I abuse mercilessly. All Rhoynar water wizards only equal 3 dragons. Well, they were able to win against 3 dragons. That's all it says. She's in the office. Well, we appreciate you tuning in on company time. That's sick. I was trying to say, Tim, if George ever wrote the actual Rhoynish backstory, they'd be psychic turtles. Like, they'd be turtle gods. They'd have powers. The Rhoynish wizards would be tapping into their consciousness or some weird shit, like that. So
yeah,
we just have to fill in the blanks, but it's something.
Like those tortoise shell shields, they're not hunted for them. Those are only made after the turtle dies of natural causes, and it's probably done as a way of honoring them. something like that.
Sacred ceremony, yeah. Or
Yeah,
more likely, they would just make the shields out of metal and wood and make them look like turtle shells. That's probably what they would do.
yeah, just designed to look like them.
Yeah.
Let's
So
see.
I just want to pull up the map real quick so you can see these cities are right next to each other. Most of this is going to go on between Dagger Lake and Volantis here. So let's see. Our cities and towns are burned. Is that where we are?
Yeah, so we got all these wars, Dagger Lake, Spice War, many more, too numerous to recount here. Cities and towns were burned, drowned, and rebuilt. Thousands were killed or enslaved. In these conflicts, the Valyrians emerged as victors more often than not. The princes of the Rhoyne, fiercely proud of their independence, fought alone, whilst the Valyrian colonies aided one another, and when hard pressed, called upon the power of the freehold itself. Beldakar's History of the Rhoynish Wars is without equal in describing these conflicts, which stretched over the best part of 2.5 centuries. So, yeah, we got the Rhoynish fiercely independent. So, this is not a united front. This is just each Rhoynish city is like out on its own every time the Valyrians roll up.
And it's not a concerted Valyrian Empire attempt to subjugate the Rhoynar. It's more like regional conflicts between the different freeholder cities, which are connected to Valyria, but they're not as important to the Valyrians as the Valyrian cities themselves. Like, you got to remember, they're very inward looking, even as they're conquering. They're conquering outward to like feed their lust for gems and gold and wealth and slaves and things like that. The most prestigious Valyrians, they really care only about Valyrian politics and the latest glass candle plays and things that they're putting on. So it's got to be this is the only way it can go for 2.5 centuries, because you can see once the Valyrians get fully engaged, it's over like really quick.
Yeah. Yeah, so for the people living in the freehold, this is like the frontier. The outposts are a second thought to them. This series of
Did they say so? Talk is asking which was founded first, Volantis or those southern Rhoynar cities. It would have been the Rhoynar cities, but just to double check,
it did say Volantis was starting to crop up during this time. That it started as one of these outposts, but grew into a city.
Right? Yeah. And let's just see if it says anything here. It's definitely the oldest of the free cities. But the Rhoynish civilization, I guess we don't know like when the Rhoynish built each different city, but they're definitely older than Valyria. And so, yeah, I think we just read probably the best information we're going to get on that. All right, carry on.
Let's see. The series of conflicts reached a bloody climax with a 1,000 years ago in the Second Spice War, when 3 Valyrian dragon lords joined with their kin and cousins in Volantis to overwhelm, sack, and destroy Sarhoy, the great Rhoynar port city upon the Summer Sea. The warriors of Sarhoy were slaughtered savagely, their children carried off into slavery, and their proud pink city put to the torch. Afterward, the Volantines sowed the smoking ruins with salt so that Sarhoy might never rise again. This is the Punic Wars. Carthage must never rise again. So after this is like Rome after putting down Hannibal, and it's like we got to make sure this never happens again. The Third Punic War ends with Rome salting the earth of Carthage. You're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. The Valyrians do that in Slaver's Bay too. I was just looking for so Sarhoy, that's the one right at the mouth of the Rhoyne. Yeah. Yep. Sow them with salt.
Yeah, Hannibal's at the gate. The mad lad marched elephants over the mountains. The utter destruction. Oh, and which could very well happen in our main story with the Golden Company if they bring the elephants over. We might get a Hannibal moment. The utter destruction of one of the richest and most beautiful of the cities of the Rhoyne, and the enslavement of her people shocked and dismayed the remaining Rhoynar princes. We shall all be slaves unless we join together to end this threat, declared the greatest of them, Garin of Chroyane. This warrior prince called upon his fellows to join with him in a great alliance to wash away every Valyrian city on the river. Yeah,
I'll go ahead and take a turn, Tim. I feel like I'm warmed up here. I'm seeing fresh round of mustache compliments. Thank you. It's going to stick around for a minute, so glad you like it. And big Tombstone fan. Maybe it's not too late to get a period acting career going. Probably getting carried away, but I appreciate it. And so only Princess Nymeria of Nysar spoke against him. So enter Princess Nymeria of Nysar. This is where she comes into the story. This is a war we cannot hope to win, she warned. But the other princes shouted her down and pledged their swords to Garin. Even the warriors of her own Nysar were eager to fight, and Nymeria had no choice but to join the Great Alliance. The largest army, because remember, they hadn't united before, so this was really important to unite. But unfortunately, Nymeria was correct, And here again, Tim, I looked for a historical parallel to this idea of like, we should flee instead of defending our civilization. And then they didn't, and we're like, I think this is something that George pretty much invented. Like once they get moving, it feels like the Exodus with the Greyscale, like one of the 10 plagues called down, on the Egyptians / Valyria. Well, that's obvious. But this part here where she's like, we shouldn't fight, we should leave. And then she's proven correct and leads the migration. I think George just made that up. As far as I can tell.
Yeah, I can't think off the top of my head any point in history where a group didn't fight. Like I can definitely know when they retreated and but never without at least trying one battle first.
So, the largest army that Essos had ever seen soon assembled at Chroyane. So that's really something, okay? Under the command of Prince Garin, according to Beldekar, it was 250,000 strong. From the headwaters of the Rhoyne down to her many mouths, why did that scroll wheel out of control? Every man of fighting age took up the sword and shield and made his way to the festival city to join this great campaign. So long as the army remained beside Mother Rhoyne, the prince declared, they need not fear the dragons of Valyria. Their own water wizards would protect them against the fires of the Freehold. And remember, they've been fighting wars against the Valyrians for over 2 centuries and mostly holding their own. So this is not like an empty boast. He's like, no, we've tangled with these guys before. We know how to handle it. It'll be chill. So much like Robb Stark, Garin divides his host around a river to put the forces on different banks. He divides it into 3 parts. So one marches down the east bank of the Rhoyne, one on the west, and the other was a huge fleet of war galleys that kept pace in between, sweeping the river clean of enemy ships. That sounds like a good formation. From Chroyane, Prince Garin led his gathered might downriver, destroying every village, town, and outpost in his path and smashing all opposition. So we are cleaning the Valyrians out. So you can see where Chroyane is, the Sorrows. And they're moving down and just clearing it out. They're probably committing some atrocities too, because these are just Valyrian citizens, some of them living in towns, but sorry, gotta go. And they're winning. So go ahead with Atzel Horis.
Oh, so I want to just capture 2 questions here. So one was asking, who is Beldekar? Beldekar is a maester of the Citadel who was writing about Rhoynish history. And then Girl Nettle says, shouldn't water always win against fire? Well, no, Pokemon rules. Water is actually not very effective against dragon. So
Pokemon. I think what we're going to see is that they use so much fire that they heat the river up to boil.
Yeah, they boil the river. Yeah, it just becomes a huge lobster bake.
You just need a lot of fire And it would be a turtle bake, technically. But
Yeah, turtle soup. Garin divided his enormous host
no, at
into three.
Selhorys, page
Oh,
on.
at Salhoris, he won his first battle, overwhelming a Valyrian army 30,000 strong and taking the city by storm. Valisar met the same fate. At Voluntheris, Garin found himself facing 100,000 foes, 100 war elephants, and 3 dragon lords. Here too he prevailed, though at great cost. Thousands burned, but thousands more sheltered in the shallows of the river, whilst their wizards raised enormous waterspouts against the foe's dragons. Rhoynish archers brought down 2 of the dragons, while the third fled wounded. In the aftermath, Mother Rhoyne rose in rage to swallow Voluntheris. Thereafter, men began to name the victorious prince Garin the Great, and it is said that in Volantis, great lords trembled in terror as his host advanced. Rather than face him in the field, the Volantines retreated back behind their black walls and appealed to the freehold for help. And the dragons came. Not 3, as Prince Garin had faced at Voluntheris, but 300 or more, if the tales that have come down to us can be believed.
So go ahead,
Against
Tim. Pause there for a second before we get into the worst of this battle. Just want to point out, this is never mentioned anywhere in the narrative. It's left for us to connect it. But there's a reason why the Dornish alone in all of Westeros were able to bring down one of Aegon's dragons. Well, Rhaenys' dragon, Meraxes. It's because they'd done it before. Their ancestors apparently had created some kind of giant crossbow, and they brought down 2 dragons out of 3 in this battle, which is pretty incredible. So it makes a little more sense that their descendants would be like, our ancestors know the way to take down the dragon, And then they...
Yeah, because it is with a giant scorpion bolt that Meraxes is taken down during the conquest.
So I just always think that's cool that there's that link. It seems like, George had the Dornish do that first. And then when he was backfilling this Rhoynish history, he created the precedent for it. But however he did it, it works. So, and then we can see when it says Mother Rhoyne rose in rage to swallow Voluntheris, that just means the water wizards did their thing again. They flooded the city again. So they've done this to multiple cities now, which is pretty bad. Like, even if you bring enough dragons, you can overwhelm the water wizards, but the water wizards can destroy whole cities with their floods. So it's pretty potent.
Yeah. And what interests me too is like I get this could just be shared cultural things because of island nations and river dwellers having sort of a shared cultural influence, but the water towers, these like water spouts, they become they're a sigil in the Iron Islands for House Merlin. And then Torrent, there's a House Torrent, but they're sister men. They're part of the 3 sisters. So it just seems like this whole water thing is not just for the Rhoynish. Like they're different. It crops up differently, and it might be because of Nymeria and her different travels. Like maybe there's little pockets that might have gone not just to on the way to Dorne, maybe settle to other places that we just don't really
I wouldn't think it has to be that. I think it's a case of like, just as we see different people using fire magic and other kinds of sorcery, if water magic can be done, it can be done. And so it makes sense that on the Iron Islands, where we have both sorcery and a water-based culture and deep one hybrids and stuff, and House Merlin, of course, Merlin is a wizard. So it's like a house named after a wizard as a water spout for a sigil. He's a water wizard. Water wizards can raise water spouts. So it's like, what kind of a water wizard would you be if you couldn't raise a water spout? It must be like the first thing you do is raise a little bit of water out of the water. Like you manipulate the water. If you can't do that, how are you a water wizard? So,
So water wizards are not Rhoynish exclusive, I guess.
No, I don't think so. I just think they made work of it the most. But if you go back to ancient Ironborn history, you probably find it, I would say. But yeah, here is where it is really used by a great civilization in an organized fashion. So you
So
had a good little head of steam there going. Tim, go ahead with 300 or more against their
yeah,
fires.
against their fires, the Rhoynar could not stand. Tens of thousands burned, whilst others rushed into the river, hoping that the embrace of Mother Rhoyne would offer them protection against dragon flame, only to drown in their mother's embrace. Some chroniclers insist that the fires burned so hot that the very waters of the river boiled and turned to steam. Garin the Great was captured alive and made to watch his people suffer for their defiance. His warriors were shown no such mercy. The Volantines and their Valyrian kin put them to the sword, so many that it was said that their blood turned the great harbor of Volantis red as far as the eye could see. And this is another image that crops up a number of times, is rivers or seas turning red with blood because of the sheer amount of people that died there.
And of course, like the Rhoynar flooded,
Mm-hmm.
they've flooded whole towns and cities of the Valyrians now. So we've definitely crossed the point of no return. It's going to be massacre, like whoever wins, you know. So, yeah,
Yeah.
those are the stakes.
Let's see. So thereafter, the victors gathered their own forces and moved north along the river, sacking Sarmel savagely before advancing on Chroyane, Prince Garin's own city. Locked in a golden cage at the command of the Dragon Lords, Garin was carried back to the festival city to witness its destruction.
So this is terrible here. This is George dipping into historical horror. Like we find stories like this, like because the thing is, people are aware of this of the symbolism of things. So not only are we going to defeat you, we're going to take the leader and humiliate the leader in a way that perhaps inverts the traditions of your people, something that shows your gods have no power. We're going to defy your customs, defile all of it. You know, think of Melisandre and Stannis burning Mance Rayder in the Weirwood cage. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like burning just as she made the wildlings burn the Weirwood to cross over. She's like, the old gods have no power. We're burning them. You'll now worship the fire god, and we're going to destroy your leader in a Weirwood cage with the power of our fire god. And then she's preaching while she's doing it. So it's the same sort of symbolism here.
Yeah.
And this is straight out of history. This is what people do because you're trying to crush the identity of a people, really, when you're subjugating them. So it's absolutely brutal. And that's, like I said, those are the stakes. And
Yeah.
the horrible thing is that once they lose this battle at Volantis, there's now no one to defend the entire river. And so the Valyrians are now moving back up the river. And just as Garin and his army destroyed the Valyrian towns going down, now that's going to be paid back double. And the Valyrians are going to move back up the river and just do it all that much harder. So,
Yeah. And something I think about, like, because this will happen again centuries later, where the Dornish will do this to the Targaryens, and it's like it reminds me of that line Tyrion says, like, we're all dancing on the strings of our forebears. In the next war of Dornish conquest with Daeron the Young Dragon, after he is killed, Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight is captured, and he is put into a cage. The Dornish put him in a cage and hang him above a pit of serpents, of venomous snakes. And Baelor the Blessed has to walk barefoot in and try and rescue him.
yeah, that's a similar sort of symbolic humiliation of a leader to show that he's powerless, kind of a thing. Yeah. And then the further challenge to Baelor, the holy man. It's like, well, let's see if your god can save you from the power of the Dornish snake of venom.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. At Chroyane, yeah, the cage was hung from the walls so that the prince might witness the enslavement of the women and children whose fathers and brothers had died in his gallant, hopeless war. But the prince, it is said, called down a curse upon the conquerors, entreating Mother Rhoyne to avenge her children. And so that very night, the Rhoyne flooded out of season and with greater force than was known in living memory. A thick fog full of evil humors fell, and the Valyrian conquerors began to die of Greyscale. Okay, so before we go into the Lovecraft thing, because this is where it starts to come up, this also sounds like Isn't this one of the great plagues of Egypt? The Nile flooding out of season?
Yes, I believe you're right about that. I meant to look up the 10 plagues before this and I forgot. But I believe that you are correct.
Yeah, and a thick fog of evil humors. The Valyrian, yeah.
It's definitely supposed to be the same vibes. Like, we're not doing 10 plagues, but it's a mysterious plague called up, you know, against this foe that they're trying to escape from. So it's very similar. But then the plague itself is mostly drawn from Lovecraft. Oh, the Nile turns to blood.
Yeah. We don't have locusts, and instead of frogs, we have turtles.
See, in order: water turning to blood, frogs, lice, flies, livestock, pestilence, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and then the firstborn children. So yeah, there's not. We're not seeing necessarily. And thank you guys for the knowledge there. So it's not so much. It's the vibes. We invented our own plague, but it is a plague, and it's called down by their priest leader. It's very similar.
Yeah.
So.
It's just like all this talk about the Rhoyne flooding and the area around the Rhoyne being very fertile. It is very Nile River Valley. That's
Especially,
what the Nile
yeah.
does.
Yeah. So go ahead and close out this section, and then I'll flip over to your notes.
Sure. So there is at least this much truth of the tale. In later centuries, Lomas Longstrider wrote of the drowned ruins of Chroyane, its foul fogs and waters, and the fact that wayward travelers infected with Greyscale now haunt the ruins. A hazard for those who travel the river beneath the broken span of the Bridge of Dream.
And of course, I will just say that we read that whole chapter with Tyrion on the. I don't remember who it was with. Were you there, Tim? It was with somebody, but
Which one again?
the Tyrion chapter on the Rhoyne. I feel like it might have been somebody else.
No, it wasn't. Nah.
I do have that chapter read up in the chapter Hall of Fame read list if anybody wants it.
Yeah. On my channel, I did do my own table reading of Tyrion on the baggage train traveling with Illyrio Mopatis. So you can check that out too.
Wasn't it Sean? Somebody says. Yeah, might have been. Might have been.
Okay, so did we want to switch over?
Yeah.
Gotham
I guess
here?
I guess we'll go ahead and stop here. There's no more about Grayscale. And while you get started with this, I'm going to go grab a fresh drink. So instead of pausing with the music, I will just turn it over to Tim for 1 second. And yeah, I've already read these notes, so I know where Tim is going with this. I should be able to hop back in midstream and not be confused. So I'll be right back. Go ahead, Tim.
Yep. So, Garin's curse and the curse of Gotten Othwa, and this is another Lovecraft influence on George's world building. Gotten Othwa is a great old one, and he is one of the children of Cthulhu. In the story Out of the Aeons is when we first meet him, and he has this power, which we call the Curse of Gotten Othwa. So Garin and Gotten, you kind of can see like the naming conventions lining up first and foremost. So Prince Garin the Great, we just read all this. He goes to war, blah, blah. He's in the cage. He calls upon the Mother Rhoyne. The Rhoyne floods, and we get the first cases of Greyscale that we know of, that we first hear of in history. And to this day, the Sorrows is known for its foul fogs and waters, and the ruins of Chroyane are haunted by stone men, people suffering from the late stages of Greyscale. The Chroyane is now like a large-scale leper colony. So the spread and effects of Greyscale mirror the powers of Gotten Othwa. First appears in the 1935 story Out of the Aeons. Lovecraft presents the monster as a gigantic abomination whose appearance is so hideous that anyone who gazes upon it or its image is petrified into a living mummy. So the effects of Gotten Othwa's curse first cause the victim's skin to take on the consistency of leather. Lesions then begin to form and crust over, growing harder and harder like stone. So we see more of this Greyscale leprosy connection, right? The internal organs are kept intact, and the brain is left fully aware while the body feels every bit of pain. the nervous system sending pain signals to the brain as the skin blisters, crusts, and hardens. When we think of like, whenever we hear like the phrases like a fate worse than death, this is one of them, because you're feeling every little bit of this, and it's purposely keeping you alive while it does it. The body stiffens until the victim is rendered completely immobile. They become a living statue. By the end of the ordeal, they are left mummified, but fully aware of their surroundings. They are unable to move or speak, signal for help, trapped in a living hell of pain. Destruction of the brain is the only end of the torment. Now, the curse can be lifted with the use of spells, but survivors are usually driven insane or catatonic because of the experience of having it. All depends, on how long were you suffering under this before you got the cure, because you're going to carry that weight. The effect of Greyscale on the Stone Men differs in that the disease does turn inward. According to what we know about Greyscale, it can and will attack the organs. It's also said that Greyscale is not painful, but causes numbing and a loss of sensation in the extremities. Now, I would argue that numbness, maybe it's not painful, but numbness is definitely something wrong, right? It's still your brain and your body sending signals to you that, hey, something's not right here. So yeah, not extreme pain. It differs because it's numbness. And then either way, though, whether it be the Greyscale or Gottenoth curse, the afflicted always go mad in the end. And then, of course, following another Lovecraft connection, because Iron Island, anytime we got Lovecraft, of course, the Iron Islands comes up. Euron Greyjoy's first act of kinslaying, his brother Harlan Greyjoy. Harlan's Greyscale had spread to his tongue and lips, turning them to stone. He's unable to speak, unable to breathe through his mouth. So Euron kills him. Euron gives him the gift of mercy by pinching his nostrils shut and suffocating him. Mute.
So there you go. Greyscale turns out to not be a random weird thing, but a specific weird thing from this story. Lovecraft. And you said this is not Lovecraft, but rather somebody writing after Lovecraft in his universe, correct?
No, this is Lovecraft. It was ghost. The story Out of the Aeons is ghost written by Lovecraft. But it is his work. The idea of Gottenoth then becoming Cthulhu's son comes later.
All right. So is there any clue in this story about what George might be planning to do with Greyscale, which John Conn has obviously brought to Westeros for some reason?
That I couldn't say. I think Lovecraft was just playing with the idea of horrible leprosy. And George, of course, is just lifting the idea. What George is doing by taking it further, though, by making... because there is the idea that those who have Greyscale might be immune from being whited. And it's just a matter of how do you utilize that?
Yeah. I've never... Any sort of Greyscale as a solution theory doesn't really make sense to me, but I guess it's either just going to be further chaos in King's Landing that, drives the plot forward. There's an epidemic, so people, certain things will happen, or it could have some sort of magical purpose. Let's do a poll, Maynard Plum. If you're by your computer, I'll give you a couple minutes to punch that in, and if not, I'll do it. But do you think Greyscale is mostly a plot device, or does it have a magical purpose? Plot device meaning to move the events of King's Landing, or does it have a magical purpose tied to, the others or something like that? I am curious to see what the people think. So we'll just give Maynard Plum a couple of minutes to drop that poll in the chat. And then we'll check in on it after a few minutes. So, fun. I don't want to have Greyscale. It's
the point of Stone Men, though, might be more referred to every time we come across the idea that when it comes up the story of a statue moving, like John down in the crypts, the eyes of the statue seem to be following him. Stuff like that. I think it's meant more to make us think of things like that by having like the idea of the statue, can the statues come to life? Well, maybe, because symbolically, here we have literal stone men.
Yeah, of course, Eldrick Stoneskin might have some things to add, so check out his channel, Eldrick Stoneskin. He does think that Greyscale had something to do with like the first Kings of Winter, or that is a magical way to preserve people or something like that, that there is a magical purpose behind it. So there's a few different ideas floating around about what it could have. But yeah, I tend to think it's just going to be a plot device, which is kind of boring. I'm sorry. But yeah, it was a really incredible. I mean, the Tyrion chapter is sensational.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very fun chapter. We had a lot of fun reading it. So, okay. So getting back to, thank you, Tim, for that extra bit of lore there. Oh, I guess we were picking up higher on the Rhoynar. Hang on. I'll pick up reading. Higher on the Rhoynar, in Nysar, Princess Nymeria soon received the news of Garin's shattering defeat and the enslavement of the people of Chroyane and Sarmel. The same fate awaited her own city, she saw. Accordingly, she gathered every ship that remained upon the Rhoynar, large or small, and filled them full of as many women and children as they could carry, for almost all of the men of fighting age had marched with Garin and died. Down the river, Nymeria led this ragged fleet, past ruined and smoking towns and fields of the dead, through waters choked with bloated, floating corpses. To avoid Volantis and its hosts, she chose the older channel and emerged into the summer sea where once Sarhoy had stood. Stone Man syndrome is a real medical condition. Yeah, I think I knew that. I don't know anything about it, though. Do not look it up. Okay. We'll keep the Tim.
I defy you. What is it going to be, like Harlequin babies or something?
I think that's what we're talking about.
Mm.
Body horror warning.
Muscles and connective tissues like tendons and ligaments gradually turn in the bone. The process creates a second skeleton that restricts movements and can lead to significant mobility issues.
Sounds like it would.
Yeah.
So that's tough.
That sounds exactly like what Got Northwood just did to people.
So yeah, it seems like it's not surprising that Lovecraft would take something like that and turn it into a trumped up magical thing. I mean, that's what George does a lot. Like I said, frozen fire is obsidian, which is cooled magma, so it has fire essence imbued into it. Like that's how we're doing stuff. Now, it's interesting when we think about Lovecraft and the things he was trying to depict, Tim, which is all the horrifying and terrifying things about the world that we have to deal with. And he takes them and personifies them into like hideous, monstrous form. But emotionally, you can identify where some of this is coming from. So the idea of a disease that restricts your movement gradually to where you're just a prisoner in your own body and you're helpless just watching this all happen. Like, if you think about the feeling of powerlessness in society, watching the degradation of your own life or your perceived degradation of your neighborhood or your people, your culture, whatever, and feeling unable to do anything about it as things get worse and worse. Like, that's something we can all relate to some extent. This is like just like the body horror version of it, but that's just to get even more general, it's a basic part of life that you can't change everything. You can't fix everything that's wrong. And you just kind of have to live with the knowledge that some stuff is really messed up and maybe getting worse. And there's nothing you can do about it. And so Lovecraft is sort of exploring feelings like that in a very extreme way with stuff like this. But it's a valid emotion that we all experience, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And we've got to remember, like, Lovecraft was afraid of life. He really was. Man was terrified that he was going to go insane, and that terror probably did drive him insane.
Yeah, that was really interesting that you told me that, Tim.
Yeah, it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm pretty sure his death, his intestinal cancer, more than likely resulted from the stress of his own fear that he was going to go insane like his parents were. He just felt that it was inevitable, and his writing is all an exploration of that, of like, well, it's inevitable, it's going to happen, but what exactly is going to happen? Well, let me jot down some thoughts.
Well, and unfortunately, therapy wasn't quite the same back then as it is now. So both of his parents went to mental institutions and probably had horrible things happen to them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we're talking man's born in the early 1900s, starts writing in around 1919. He dies in 1937.
You don't want to be in
Yeah.
any sort of institution in the 1910s or 20s somewhere. That's not good.
No. I mean, you've seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and that movie was made in the 70s.
I have seen and read that story, and that is exactly what the hell I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a joyful stream that we're doing here. Hi everyone, welcome to our channel.
Yeah,
Make sure to like the scream, the scream, the
Yeah,
Frightmare
that's right.
stream with
That
a
is
little
right,
thumbs
Sean.
up. That really helps people see it. Appreciate that. Shout out to Here with 1,000 Voices in the chat. It's another good YouTube channel. Just click on his name in the chat, buzz over to his channel and sub if you haven't already. Sean's making a lot of killer videos about Ice and Fire that you will like if you like my videos, quite in all likelihood. So okay, they chose the older channel. Go ahead and pick it up, Tim, with Legend Tells Us.
Legend tells us that Nymeria took 10,000 ships to sea, searching for a new home for her people beyond the long reach of Valyria and its dragon lords. Beldekar argues that this number was vastly inflated, perhaps as much as tenfold. Other chroniclers offer other numbers, but in truth, no true count was ever made. We can safely say there were a great many ships. Most were rivercraft, skiffs and pole boats, trading galleys, fishing boats, pleasure barges, even rafts, their decks and holds crammed full of women and children and old men. Only 1 in 10 was remotely seaworthy, Beldekar insists. So yeah, this is scramble. Anything that can float, we all float. We gotta get out of here.
And this is
Nymeria-
typical. If you look up any sort of battle from more than a few hundred years ago, it's like some sources say there was 30,000 men. Others say it was 5,000. Some say it was as many as 60,000. Most historians settle on a number between 15 and 20. Like, this is the kind of bullshit that's in every historical attempt to suss out, like, how many things, how many troops, how many ships. The point is that they are grabbing everything that can float. So we understand the vibe of it. 10,000 makes a nice number for the story. But of course, 1,000 is probably more likely. A few hundred might even be more likely. But however many it was enough to carry thousands of Rhoynish all the way through their adventures and to make it to Dorne and to have a sizable impact on the population of Dorne. So it was thousands of people, and that means it was a lot of ships.
It's just that, like, 10,000 ships makes for a good song title, and as we're told over and over throughout this, the singers always over-exaggerate.
Garin wanted that smoke with Valyria, like David Lightbringer wanted smoke with Dan and Dave after what they did to Daenerys in Game of Thrones Season 8. Thanks, Kelly Johnson, for reminding us about that. Nah, it's cool. It's cool. Appreciate you. And I mean, I took my shots at David Dan in my video. I'm content with my work there. I have my themes are for Book Reports Dave and Dan meme that I still flash on from time to time in a video. Sean, I will just ask you or anybody else in the chat. Most of the Maester names are call outs to history. Does anybody know what Beldekar is a reference to? And don't give me like Belshazzar from Babylon. Like, Beldekar is going to be some they're usually historians and people like that. So if anybody knows. So Nymeria's voyage.
Let's see. Nymeria's voyage was long and terrible. More than 100 ships foundered and sank in the first storm her fleet encountered. As many or more turned back in fear and were taken by slavers out of Atlantis. Others fell behind or drifted away, never to be seen again. The
There she
remainder of
is.
there she
There's
is.
Nymeria with her
There's
turtle
our
shield.
queen. Her title is princess, but we know she's a queen. The remainder of the fleet limped across the summer sea to the Basilisk Isles, where they paused to take on fresh water and provisions, only to fall afoul of the corsair kings of Axisle, Talon, and the Howling Mountain, who put aside their own quarrels long enough to descend upon the Rhoynar with fire and sword, putting 20 ships to the torch and carrying off hundreds into slavery. Oh, and then Axisle, that's that one where that Carthene pirate built a fortress of black stone. And I have a feeling that it's probably like one of those black sand beaches. In the aftermath, the Corsairs offered to allow the Rhoynar to settle upon the Isle of Toads, so you can go live with the freaky frog people, provided that they give up. You like turtles? Well, frogs are close enough. Provided they give up their boats and send each king 30 virgin girls and pretty boys each year as tribute. So there we are.
That's a hard deal to refuse, you know?
Yeah. How can I lose? Yeah.
And so Nymeria refused, of course, having dignity and stuff, and took her fleet to sea once again, hoping to find refuge amongst the steaming jungles of Sothroyos. It's one thing you could try. Some settled on Basilisk Point, others beside the glistening green waters of the Zamoyos, amongst the quicksands, crocodiles, and rotting half-drowned trees. Princess Nymeria herself remained with the ships at Zamatar, a Giscari colony abandoned for 1,000 years, while others made their way upriver to the Cyclopean ruins of Yen, haunt of ghouls and spiders. So, okay, let's see. Yeah. Zamatar, so Basilisk Point.
This is like an inverted version of Exodus, but instead of 40 years of wandering through the desert, we're wandering through cursed rainforests and swamps. All that changes is the environment.
So I'm going to scroll here. This one I think has the most detail. So yeah, Zamatar is right here at the mouth of the Zamoyos River. So Basilisk Point is kind of far away, but it makes sense that we've got Zamatar and then people going down the river to Yen. So they're sort of connected here. There's a theory behind this. And also the colonists, like the British colonists, when they're landing on the east coast of the United States, or what became the United States, they're mostly seeking out the river mouths and estuaries and then sailing up the river. That's kind of how they're doing it. So similar vibes here.
So, because Yen's constructed of black stone and has a river running through it, and so is Asshai. Asshai has the river Ash running through it, which flows through Stagai. So, what could be the Zamatar connection?
Cookie Chris, that is interesting, but not particularly relevant. We're going to get into some of that Iberian history, but a lot more recent. We're not going quite back that far today. That is interesting, though. Thank you for the super chat. And let's see here. There were riches to be found in Sothroyos: gold, gems, rare woods, exotic pelts, queer fruits, strange spices. But the Rhoynar did not thrive there. The sullen wet heat oppressed their spirits, and the swarms of stinging flies spread one disease after another. Green fever, the dancing plague. That sounds horrible. Blood boils, weeping sores, sweet rot. We know bronze pates lurking around there too. The young and very old proved especially vulnerable to such contagions. Even to splash in the river was to court death, for the Zamoyos was infested with schools of carnivorous fish, piranha, and tiny worms that laid their eggs in the flesh of swimmers. That sounds worse. And 2 of the new towns on Basilisk Point were raided by slavers, their populaces put to the sword or carried off in chains, whilst Yen had to contend with attacks from the brindled ghouls of the jungle deeps. So this is kind of interesting, again, to go back to the situation with the colonies in the New World, in the Americas. That was also the age of piracy, too. But the pirates weren't preying on the colonists. The colonists were the pirates. Like, the colonists would get to certain places and turn pirate. That was the whole point of funding these expeditions.
That's why some of them are called privateers. Like they were paid to pirate. They were funded. There was government funding to pirate.
Oh yeah, shout out to the Candiru fish. I shouldn't just say.
Oh yeah, I'm sure the Zamoyos has Kangaroo. This naughty little fish with a penchant for swimming up a man's urethra.
This is turning into ultimate body horror stream.
Anytime we go to Sothroyos, it's bound to happen.
It's true. I should have seen it coming. So
it's hell on earth. It's green hell on earth.
Okay, so let's see. And Yin had to contend with attacks from the brindled ghouls of the jungle deeps. And we know those are brindled men. We've discussed how the idea that they eat the dead is unlikely to be true. George has given us the clue of the broad, flat teeth to suggest that they're largely plant eaters, perhaps. But that's only a potential clue. Maybe they are ghouls. Maybe some brindled men are ghouls and some are not. But, this is their turf. So, of course, you're going to run into them. And again, we go not to compare Native Americans to brindled men directly, but anytime you invade somebody's continent, you got to deal with the natives. And so, of course, that's the situation here. The natives of Sothroyos are just a little strange. Eldacar was king of Gondor. Oh, that's pretty good, Talk Studios. Son of Valacar from Tolkien. Okay. Interesting. And I guess the, Gondor is founded by Númenóreans that sailed across the sea from the destruction of their empire and founded a new empire. So there's some vague parallels to Nymeria there. Yeah, I can see that. And so, there's some Nissa Garth stuff with Garin and Nymeria, but I don't really want to go down that road this evening. So let's stick with the story here and go ahead with For More Than a Year.
For more than a year, the Rhoynar struggled to survive in Sothroyos until the day when a boat from Zamatar arrived at Yin to find that every man, woman, and child in that haunted, ruined city had vanished overnight. Then Nymeria summoned again for her people back to the ships and set sail once again. So is this where you want to go into the notes?
Yes, sir. And so this creepy little story comes, of course, from a real story. And that is the story of Roanoke. Roanoke was an attempt to make the first permanent English settlement in America in 1585. The first one that really stuck was Jamestown, which is like 1601, 1603, one of those two. So this is a little bit before that. It is funded by Sir Walter Raleigh. And in 1584, they came and just to check it out. Okay. And so they made contact with the Carolina Algonquin tribe. And then they basically decided, okay, this is a place we can come. So the next year, they sent 600 colonists from Ebgland. For our English in the audience, I will correct spelling. To set up a colony, and this was under the command of Sir Richard Grenville and Governor John White. And the reason why I mention both names is because these people would start having a disagreement. Storms forced them to stop in Puerto Rico for repairs and a bit of piracy, privateering. I sort of merged those words together. But yes, so they basically restored their supplies by stealing from other, Spanish colonists and people that were there. And so they started getting into an argument about how long they were staying because they had all these goals they wanted to get to, and the storms are a big deal. So they got to, time is of the essence, blah, blah, blah. Now, when they sailed to Roanoke, the largest ship couldn't enter the harbor. And so it anchored farther offshore where the seas were stormier. And very soon it suffered catastrophic damage. And so they lost most of their food and supplies. Wah, wah. So then we have Lane. It's not Governor John White. John White comes later. It's somebody Lane. I screwed that up. Sorry. Grenville and I think it's Richard Lane. No, it's not. It's somebody Lane. Doesn't matter. In any case, he wants to stay, and Grenville goes back to England after they lose all their supplies. So Lane and 100 men stay at Roanoke. Grenville goes back to England. Supposed to come back next year. Be right back, you guys, with more colonists and supplies. But what happens is the Spanish and the English are fighting. And so he is delayed like 3 years getting back. And in the meantime, the colonists are dependent on the Algonquin, but then began quarreling with them. And when European diseases start spreading to the Algonquin, their chief, Wengina, decides that they're a problem and they got to go. So Lane is now becoming tyrannical. He builds a jail and he's cracking down and stuff. This is all just sounds like a horror story. And Wengina actually changes his name to Pemisipan, which indicates some sort of new warlike status. We don't know the history of that tradition, but if you change your name, it's a pretty significant thing, obviously. And so he hatches a plan to cut the colonists off of food. But Lane catches wind of it and has him killed, which starts a big problem. So in 1586, Francis Drake comes by, sees what a predicament they're in, and brings everyone back to England. So that's the first fail. That's not the lost colony, though. So the next year, Walter Raleigh sends this guy, John White, and 118 new colonists. And Roanoke's not their destination, but they are left there. Anyway, there was a small garrison left on Roanoke from the first one. They meant to make contact there. But then the captain of their flotilla is like, nah, the weather's changed. I'm not going any further up the river. I'm leaving you here. And so these 118 colonists are now on Roanoke. They find only a bleached skeleton from the previous garrison, so it's a little creepy. Once again, they are quarreling with the Algonquin, and after a colonist is killed, they launch a reprisal attack on an Algonquin village on the island of Hatteras, which is called Croatoan in their native language. So this is Outer Banks, North Carolina. And John White, after about a month, he sails back to England. Again, I'll be right back, you guys, with some colonists. This is when the 3-year delay comes in. So this is 1587. He doesn't get back till 1590. And when he does, everyone's gone. And there's no sign of struggle. It's no bones. Everyone is gone. And the plan was that if they needed to move, because remember, they weren't even meaning to stay there. So it was always a possibility they'd move up the Chesapeake and find a better place. And so the plan was carve on a tree or the posts of the village where you go. And so sure enough, they find the settlement abandoned and this word Croatoan carved on the tree. And so again, Croatoan is the name of an island, which is not too far away. It's a decent little clip. You got to sail there, but whatever. And the thing is that White is unable to go to Hatteras to see what happened to them because of storms. And he sails back to England and is never able to return. And nobody else went and checked on them. And nothing was ever heard of them. So we don't know where they went or what happened to them at all. And there's theories. Maybe they went to Hatteras and maybe they married into the Algonquin tribe and became part of their tribe. Or obviously maybe they were massacred or something. Now they have found some artifacts on Hatteras, like a ring, I think, and a couple of a sword hilt, but they have not found any bones. So we still do not know for sure what happened to this colony. And it's a lot of people to disappear without a trace.
Yeah. And especially no signs of a struggle if they were carried off. So that's why the theory is like maybe they were depending on the natives for help.
the Algonquin a lot. So maybe they left with them, having struck out a more peaceful agreement. Maybe they became desperate. Maybe they were betrayed. We don't know. But it likely does seem that the answer to the mystery has something to do with their interaction with the Algonquin. So when we look at what happened to Nymeria's colony, something having to do with the brindled men, probably. They were probably all carried off. Or maybe they thought, maybe they were starving. And so they all left and moved somewhere where they thought there would be food. And something happened to them somewhere else. There are rumors of Algonquin that turn up later with Caucasian figures. However, the research that I did showed that those were not confirmed. Those were just rumors. So that could be true, but I do not think that is solidly proven or solidly testified to. Correct me if I'm wrong. That is what I saw this morning. So just a little extra vibes for you, but that's very clearly what George was drawing on. This is a short version of it, but of course it's tied to Yin. So it's just adds to the mystique of Yin. It could have been the spirits of deep ones or something. Might not have been the brindled men. It might have been something even darker, you know?
Yeah. And we really don't know. And so much of Sothroyos is unmapped. So if they went wandering off into the rainforest looking for, better places, like the chances of getting lost are quite high. We're told of all these horrible creatures, of giant vampire bats that can drain a man in one go. So it's like, and we've talked many, many times about the forest being the ends of the earth. And the same applies to Roanoke. When you wander into the forest and you don't know where you're going, the chances of you coming back are very, very slim.
And you can even go, we've talked about how Sothroyos is a huge continent, and there's probably other people living besides brindled men if you go further south, so maybe they found other people, but probably they just got eaten by brindled men. That's the easy conclusion to draw.
I've said many, many times, if the men of Ib are George's take on Tolkien's dwarves, and the brindled men with their hog and boar-like features seem to be his take on orcs. So yes, it is easy to blame everything on the orcs.
It sure is. So we'll go with that. For the next 3 years, would you pick it up here? And I'm going to actually run to the restroom once I flip the page.
Sure. For the next 3 years, the Rhoynar wandered the southern seas seeking a new home. On Noth, the Isle of Butterflies, the peaceful people gave them welcome, but the god that protects that strange land began to strike down the newcomers by a score with a nameless mortal illness, driving them back to their ships. So this is like the cruel, cruel irony, because this is a group that legitimately would live peacefully on Noth, not like the pirates who are constantly trying to enslave them. But the butterfly god is indiscriminate. That disease it doesn't matter how good or bad your intentions are. If you don't have the immunity, you're dying of the butterfly fever. In the Summer Isles, they settled on an uninhabited rock off the eastern shore of Wallano, which soon became known as the Isle of Women. But its thin, stony soil yielded little food and many starved. And yeah, we talked about when we did our further east and we did the Summer Isles. And that thin, stony soil is that's also more like Iron Island connection there too. When the sails were raised again, some of the Rhoynar abandoned Nymeria to follow a priestess named Druselka, who claimed to have heard Mother Rhoyne calling her children home. But when Druselka and her followers returned to their old cities, they found their enemies waiting, and most were soon hunted down, slain, or enslaved.
That reminds me a little bit of Mother Mole in the Wildlings. Like, let's go to Hardhome, our old city, and there'll be ships waiting for us. And they were slavers.
They were slavers, yeah. Let's see, the battered, tattered...
Is that... I'm sorry, Tim. Just I wanted to ask the chat if anybody knows if that name
Druselka
was a reference to anything. Druselka. That sounds like some historical reference. But I just don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
Selkie. Okay. Selkie. Drew's Selkie. What was her dream again? Oh, she claimed to have heard Mother Rhoynar. So she's hearing voices from under the sea. Yeah, that checks out.
Yeah, saying, come back, come home.
It's Druid plus Selkie. That kind of checks out. Drew Selka. Yeah, that kind of checks out. We'll go with that. Drew means wise. That's where the root of druid. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Yep. I'd say the etymology checks out. So the battered, tattered remainder of the 10,000 ships sailed west with Princess Nymeria. This time, she made for Westeros. After so much wandering, her ships were even less seaworthy than when they had first departed Mother Rhoynar. The fleet did not arrive in Dorne complete. Even now, there are isolated pockets of Rhoynar on the stepstones, claiming descent from those who were shipwrecked. Other ships, blown off course by storms, made for Lys or Tyrosh, giving themselves up to slavery in preference to a watery grave. The remaining ships made landfall on the coast of Dorne, near the mouth of the River Greenblood, not so far from the ancient sandstone walls of the Sandship, seat of House Martell. Dry, desolate, and thinly peopled, Dorne at this time was a poor land, where a score of quarrelsome lords and petty kings warred endlessly over every river, stream, well, and scrap of fertile land. Most of these Dornish lords viewed the Rhoynar as unwelcome interlopers, invaders with queer foreign ways and strange gods, who should be driven back into the sea, whence they came. But Mors Martell, Lord of the Sandship, saw in the newcomers an opportunity, and if the singers can be believed, his lordship also lost his heart to Nymeria, the fierce and beautiful warrior queen, who had led her people across the world to keep them free. Now, probably he didn't make that decision based on the idea that Nymeria was hot. The idea that she was an impressive leader of her people probably factored into it. But it mostly seems like the first sentence. He saw an opportunity. He saw a strong new ally, and instead of seeing them as foreigners that need to get off our land, he was like, this is a way for me to get a leg up on people. And also, it is said that amongst the Rhoynar who came to Dorne with Nymeria, 8 out of every 10 were women. But a quarter of those were warriors in the Rhoynish tradition, and even those who did not fight had been hardened during their travails and travels. As well, thousands who had been boys when fleeing the Rhoyne had grown into manhood and taken up the spear during their years of wandering. So there's the 2 and 10. That's where they come from. By joining with the newcomers, the Martells increased the size of their house by 10-fold. So that tells you a lot of people, thousands of people. Okay, Julia Drusilla was the favorite sister of Emperor Caligula, who after her death had her deified under the name Diva Drusilla Panthea, and named his daughter Julia Drusilla. What's the... I guess Caligula and Rome makes you think of Valyria a little bit. So that's sort of a portion of history that we're already drawing from a little bit. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Also, the idea that like Mors was swayed by Nymeria's beauty probably is like a stand-in for the idea that the Rhoynish were mostly women, and so many Rhoynish men were probably smitten, or not, Dornish men rather, would have been smitten by their beauty, if you will. So, go ahead and pick up the reading right here.
It is said that amongst the Rhoynar who came to Dorne with Nymeria, 8 of every 10 were women, but a quarter of those were warriors in the Rhoynish tradition. And even though...
Sorry, I just read that. It's when Mors Martell.
Oh, okay. When Mors Martell took Nymeria to wife, hundreds of his knights, squires, and lords' bannermen also wed Rhoynish women, and many of those who were already wed took them for their paramours. Thus were the two peoples united by blood. These unions enriched and strengthened House Martell and its Dornish allies. The Rhoynar brought considerable wealth with them, Their artisans, metalworkers, and stonemasons brought skills far in advance of those achieved by their Westeroni counterparts, and their armorers were soon producing swords and spears and suits of scale and plate no Westerosi smith could hope to match. Even more crucially, it is said the Rhoynish water witches knew secret spells that made dry streams flow again and deserts bloom.
And they would. And they would. And speaking of water witches, we've got an update on the Druselka thing. Slavic. Okay. Slavic water goddess. Rusalka is, let's see if that's the same one. Yes. A female entity, often malicious toward mankind and frequently associated with water. It has counterparts in other parts of Europe, such as the French Melusine and the Germanic Nixie. Folklorists have proposed a variety of origins for the entity, including that they may originally stem from Slavic paganism, where they may have been seen as benevolent spirits. Rusalki appear in a variety of media and modern popular culture, particularly in Slavic language-speaking countries, where they resemble the concept of the mermaid. So that checks out even more, doesn't it?
Yeah, I just see that Vodnista because in my Farmosophy stream where I was going over Slavic myth, I did bring up the Vodnoi, which are another kind of Slavic water wizard creature. And they get name dropped right there.
So I was looking for an etymology where the R turns to D or has a D in front of it. Because Rusalka is just Drusalka without the D. So that's definitely a pronunciation change, possibly. But cool. Well, we'll leave it at that. Another possible inspiration for Druselka, the water witch. You know, I mean, it seems pretty on the nose, as we say. And we also know that George, like Nissa is one of, there's many inspirations for that name, but of course the Nysa were water nymphs, Oceanid water nymphs from Greek myth.
And then Witch Isle up in the Vale is we had Ursula, which is a water witch.
A Nixie is another name for a Nereid or water spirit, which is what Nissa is. So Nysa, I believe it is. Yeah. So this is the same. This is all mermaid folklore, essentially. So let's see. Where were we?
Yeah, and that makes, because mermaids are always trying to tempt sailors to come into the ocean, and she's claiming that the river is calling back to her, tempting them to come back, but just leads them back to their old enemies and slavers.
And so look how, like, look what a benefit the Rhoynar are to Dorne. They're bringing steel, like advanced steel, even better than the Andal steel, apparently. And they are using their water magic to enhance the oases and river valleys and things, the little bits of fertile land that they're fighting over. They can make that land bloom. So incredible benefit. So Selkie would almost that's going to be the same root word as Ruselka, wouldn't it? It's got to be the same. It's got to be the same word. Let's look up Selkie and see what it says.
Yeah, well, it says that the plural version is Rusalki, so Salki, Selkie.
They're attributed Celtic and Norse origin. We need the etymology, terminology. Well, they're saying it's a Scottish word, a diminutive of selch or selk, which means gray seal. Of course, this could be a Proto-Indo-European Slavic word going back, thousands of years, but this might be outside the purview. I was just curious if there was a quick answer. It does not appear there is. So, unconfirmed. We do not know. And yeah, Lich is saying some people do, or Fallen Ruse rather, is saying some people do say Ruselka with a D. Ruselka it would be. So, very good. Okie dokie. To celebrate these unions, Tim.
And make certain her people could not again retreat to the sea, Nymeria burned the Rhoynar ships. Our wanderings are at an end, she declared. We have found a new home, and here we shall live and die. And I did mention, and this reminded me of, this is a good version of this, but then the evil version would be what happened in the real world, which is when Cortez burned his ships after they landed in the New World and then started conquering the Aztecs.
So that makes a lot of sense as a parallel, because we know George has done a lot with migrations, the European colonization of North America. Loosely speaking, Native Americans being kind of like the children of the forest, or you might say the first men after they've become loyal to the children before the Andals invade. These are all loose parallels. We've talked about that. So there's a few ship burnings, it turns out, Tim. There's two more that we need to talk about. We'll come back to MC Hammer. Or wait, no, it's up here. Okay. So I've been watching a little more Irish folklore channels. It turns out that there's no one definitive way to say this, but I will say that it is not tuatha. You do not say the th sound. It appears to be tua. It's like some sort of tua, some sort of double sound. This is the plural form. The singular is tua. So that's God, and tua is God's plural. Or folk. It's either folk. It means the god folk. I forget which is which. And it's not hawk tua. It sounds kind of, it's like that though. Yes. And so
that joke will never die.
The Tua de Danann, it's the god folk of Danu. But we're not going to go into all this. The point is, in the history, in the Book of Invasions of Ireland, there are multiple waves of invasion of Ireland. And one of the, probably the most significant one, is the coming of the Tua Ade to Ireland. And so these are basically Irish pagan deities seen through the filter of post-Christianization. So they've been sort of taken down from God status to like divine people or whatever, but they are gods that are associated with the air and with the arts and with high society and culture, and specifically with the culture of Druidism. Okay, so they have the Dagda's Cauldron and all that stuff, Sword of Light and all those things. And so the big thing here is that when they came, we're not going to go through all of the Tua Day mythology, but when they came to Ireland, they descended in a big cloud of smoke. And that is what was thought, on top of a mountain. But it turns out that smoke was from the burning of their ships. So they sailed to Ireland and they burned the ships for the exact same reason, in a sort of religious ceremony to say, we are here and we're not leaving. And so this poem comes from the Lebor Gabala Erin, and it says, "It is God who suffered them, though he restrained them. They landed with horror, with lofty deed, in their cloud of mighty combat of specters, upon a mountain, Comenki in Connacht. And without distinction to discerning Ireland, without ships, a ruthless course, the truth was not known beneath a sky of stars, whether they were of heaven or of earth. They had been wandering the wide world, descendants of Nemed, and older inhabitants of Ireland." Oh, that's not the poem anymore. I'm sorry. Those are my notes. So the point is that it seems people believe that they descend in these clouds from heaven, but it turns out that this was actually just a pillar of smoke from the burning of their ships. Now, later, they become the Aishi, and they are able to turn into mist. And so that is tied to the coming of the Tua Day in these smoke clouds. But it's really about the burning of the ships. So it's the same thing where they are burning the ships to say, no, we are conquering or dying here in this new land. And the coolest thing about it is the conflation with, because the smoke blots out the sun for 3 days. There's so much smoke from the ship burning. So now we have a conflation with, of course, the Hammer of the Waters legend, where at the same spot where Nymeria landed, this is also the spot where thousands of years ago, the Hammer of the Waters fell, which was a moon meteor. And the moon meteors, of course, threw up smoke and darkness, according to my theory, that blotted out the sun for years. So we have this nice conflation of long night, smoke pillar and blotting out the sun with the landing of the Tua Day. So that's nice. They burnt the ships, and we can see all that coming together here on the Arm of Dorne. Pretty cool, huh?
Yep. The whole thing. We see, like, again, like how everything with George's world building, how everything just fits together. It's layered, layer upon layer upon layer.
And then I've got this on my phone. I just need to add this link to the document real quick. So there's both Moorish history of the conquest of Spain that we need to talk about, and then Frankish resistance under Charles Martel, the Hammer. So all this stuff is referenced. Tim, you're going to love this. Somebody else found the Mors Martell thing too. That you found.
Oh, about Othello?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And so let me put... There we go. Okay, so I'll just click on this link here. It kind of worked.
Oh, I didn't hyperlink.
Yeah, I thought it was going to give me the clickable hyperlink. So this is from Nosferalto. Somebody after our own kind. 10 years ago. This is a Reddit write-up from 10 years ago. And Nosferalto, thank you for doing a little bit of legwork for me. I could have just copied this into bullet points, but I figured I'd just give him a shout out. He did the perfect quick summary. So this story sounds remarkably similar to Tariq ibn Ziyad's conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, currently Spain and Portugal, of course. He was a Muslim commander who sailed from Morocco to Spain and defeated King Roderick in battle by making an alliance with a nobleman named Julian. After arriving on Spanish shores, he burned his ships and famously said afterwards, "O my warriors, whither would you flee? Behind you is the sea, before you the enemy. You have left now only the hope of your courage and your constancy." So similar vibes to all the other stories that we're talking about. And so in short, the similarities are that they burned their ships to prevent the armies from returning east, made an alliance with the local noblemen to defeat other kings, sailed from east to west across a short passage. I don't think the directions are really important, but the Strait of Gibraltar, somewhat similar to the Arm of Dorne, definitely comparable. And then the region of Algarve in Portugal originates from the Arabic term Algarb, which means the West. So it is somewhat similar. He mentions that Tariq ibn Ziyad was the governor of Muslim Spain, which became known as Al-Andalus. It was called Al-Andalus because this was previously Vandal, the land of the Vandals, the Vandal kingdoms, who were Germanic tribes. We talked about them a few streams ago. They set up kingdoms in Iberia. Those were conquered by the Moors, essentially. So
this was Visigoth territory.
Yes, formerly. And so Visigoths and Andals and Alans and all the rest. And so the Muslim people of North Africa, Sicily and Malta, are referred to as the Moors. Now, I looked up the etymology of the word Moors. It's a very vague term, which the definition changes a little bit over time. Sometimes it's used more broadly for any people of North African descent in Europe. Sometimes it's more specific to that region. But essentially, like when we talk about, these were Muslims, quote unquote, They're mostly people from North Africa who have converted to Islam, as opposed to people from Syria and Saudi Arabia. There'll be some, but mostly these are North African people, Berber tribes and things like that. And so they are referred to collectively as the Moors, and this is now called Moor Spain. And their presence in Spain was very heavy for hundreds of years, and so that that's part of the integral history of Spain and its people and its culture and all that stuff. So, flipping over to our notes about Charles Martel, this is forward like 100 or 200 years in history. He didn't put the date in here. Let's look up the date on this Tariq ibn Zaid guy.
Yeah, that's very close. I was just looking up how the Strait of Gibraltar, exactly how close Spain is to Morocco, and it is a very, very thin, the Strait of Gibraltar before they touch. So I'm sure the word Moor is most likely derived from Morocco, since Morocco would be the closest point in North Africa to Spain. It would be the North African area that most Spaniards would be familiar with.
And so Fallen Ruse, I don't think you'll be able to post a link in the chat if you're not a mod. But if you can direct one of our mods, if you can give them the clues, maybe they could find the link and post it for you, or you can leave it in the comments, either one. Or you can join Patreon for free, or for not free if you want, or you can subscribe with the join button below, and then you'll get an invitation to our Discord, where we have over 1,000 wonderful people talking about stuff like this. And you'll be welcome to not only post a link, but to start a thread talking about Darkstar and the possibility that he didn't cut Marcella, because that is possible. Yeah, we have a Discord, and it's minimally gate kept. Yes, you can join Patreon for free, and if you join Patreon for free, most weeks, once a week, I post the link. I sometimes forget, but basically, yes, that is how you can join the Discord for free. It is not meant to be overly gate kept. It's just to keep it friendly and polite and family only and stuff like that. So yeah, if anybody that's giving me money, you get an invite, but you can get a link for free by joining Patreon as a free subscriber. Because a lot of people that join for free eventually end up becoming paid subscribers. So it is something that Patreon has done, which I think is super cool. And that allows an easy way for me to give the link to everybody. So moving right along, this is a picture of Tariq ibn Zaid and the last Visigothic king, Roderick. So it's quite the moment here. So if I can, there we go. So pretty cool. Rodrigo and Tariq. So he looks sad.
Rodrigo is the name of one of the characters in Othello who was manipulated.
Right. Okay. And again, stay tuned. We're going to get to very cool Othello Blackfire parallels, because Othello involves the Moors as a major plot point. So that's why George has affixed it to some Dornish Blackfire stuff. So yeah, you can see sad Rodrigo, and then Tariq, he gets the sword. So the king that has the sword, he has power. He does not have a sword, and he's sad. You can see what's going on here. And you can see there's some sort of a desert-style headscarf wrapping of some sort. Mm-hmm. There we go. And so this is literally only a couple of decades later with this Charles Martel stuff, okay? So the reason why we're talking about Charles Martel is because there's a house Martel, obviously in Dorne, and Martel means hammer. And the hammer of the waters fell on the arm of Dorne right next to where House Martel is located. So obviously, George is pointing at Charles Martel. And we look up Charles Martel. Basically, he is a political and military leader of the Franks from 718 until his death. His official title was Duke and Prince of the Franks and Mayor of the Palace. but that gets into like Merovingian history of the shifting of power between the kings and the mayors, and it's not important. He's a leader of the Franks. And so he is also the grandfather of Charlemagne, the father of Europe, quote unquote, Charlemagne the Great, whole thing. Charles Martel is kind of the inceptor of Frankish feudalism. He's the one who develops it and gets it going. So that sucks, kind of, but we'll just gloss over that. And he essentially restored the Franks as the rulers of Gaul with many military victories. So he unified the Franks, put down the rivals, etc. So that's Charles Martel developing a military reputation. But what's happened is that these Moorish kingdoms of Iberia, they're under the purview of the Umayyad Caliphate. They are not content with Spain and Iberia, and they have expanded past the Spanish marches into Gaul, which is the old name for France, and a little extra land, parts of Germany and Switzerland. And so, we already talked about that. The Vandal kingdoms, the name was changed to Al-Andalus when it became Moorish under the Umayyad Caliphate. So the Umayyad Caliphate is the power in Saudi Arabia. So these conquests are being done under the purview of that empire, but by local powers. So that's kind of how it's going. And in 732, so what's happened is, let me see if I can pull up a map real quick. I should be able to. Battle of Tours should do it. This battle is, there's some debate about its significance, but for a long time it was viewed with a huge significance that some people have now argued maybe it's not quite what has been made of it. But essentially, you can see how far north, you could on the last one, Tours, and you don't pronounce the S, it's just Tours. So sorry, French people, Tours. The the Moors have conquered into France, and they've got this southern and western part, and they are that's Aquitaine, I believe, the region of Aquitaine that they have invaded. And so the Battle of Tours is this great reversal where Charles Martel allied with Odo the Great of Aquitaine. Yes, they defeat the Umayyad forces and reverse the invasion of Aquitaine, and they sweep them back over the Spanish marches into Iberia. And so some historians in retrospect say, like, if they had lost this battle, then maybe everyone in Europe would be studying the Quran and speaking Arabic today. Because the Franks were the most powerful organized military force in Europe at the time. So if they lose to the Moors here and the Caliphate just expands into Europe, maybe. Now, it was not really seen that way at the time. It wasn't seen as some great struggle between the Christians and the Muslims. It was more seen as a struggle between local powers. However, it does take on that significance in history. And in fact, Charles Martel, Tim, has even become a slogan or rallying cry for some alt-right anti-immigrant figures, because he's the guy who stopped the Muslims. Okay, so for example, the shooter, the 2019 New Zealand shooter, who was an anti-immigrant motivated shooter, he carved Charles Martel onto his gun. Okay, so that's not Martel's fault. This is similar to, certain leaders in 1940s Germany co-opting Proto-Indo-European history and words like Aryan to shape a national identity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I just want to point out there is this historical baggage attached to this battle and this man, Charles Martel.
Yeah.
But whatever the truth of it is, which is not something that we can... Go ahead, were you going to say something?
I was just saying, which there shouldn't be, because the man died 1,200 years ago. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
So the point is that it is a battle that stops an invasion and reverses the tide and preserves the homeland. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so what do we see if we go to the Arm of Dorne and the Hammer of the Waters? The official story was that the Children of the Forest were trying to stop an invasion of the First Men, and so they called down the hammer. Mm. of the waters. Now, I think that myth is kind of twisted around. We've talked about that elsewhere. But it's the same theme as this Battle of Tours and Charles Martel. Then we see it again with the Dornish being the only people able to halt the Targaryen conquest of Westeros under the rule of the Martells. So it's a little bit ironic that Nymeria is chased away from her continent, almost like Green Garin is almost like a failed Charles Martel. He tried to preserve his homeland against the Valyrians and failed. So he's a failed Charles Martel. Then Nymeria comes to Dorne and marries a real Martell. It's kind of, just George shuffling the history around, kind of.
Yeah. And then, of course, then on the other end of that, we probably got you got Marcher Lord families who are trying to prevent the Dornish from making their way up north. So families like the Peaks, the Selmies, the Dondarrions probably view themselves as their own little Charles Martells because they've been fighting the Dornish for years. And now they got this Rhoynish influx. So now they're looking at this Dornish thing like, oh, great, a new problem. And now we've already had enough problems with them, and now they have better weapons.
Tolerance achievement unlocked 1 year with I. Shout out to Ion, someone that actually sends me PayPals. Appreciate you. That's a great point.
I meant to say sell me, not Carly.
And the whole Dornish marches, Spanish marches, it's supposed to sound the same. And so, of course, Nymeria marries Mors Martell. Okay, so like we said, there's two different things. The Moors themselves invading and conquering Spain is like Nymeria invading Dorne, because essentially, if you think about it, Westeros is white, it's Caucasoid, it is pale, lighter skinned, right? But in Spain, of course, people have darker skin tones because of this heavy Moorish presence in Spain for over 600 years. The Moorish rule lasts until the Reconquista. So this is very similar. Down in Rhoynar, we see the only non-white or non-pale people. White isn't really a term, obviously, in Westeros, but see what I'm saying? The Rhoynish, the salty Dornish, as they are called, have much more bronze, medium skin tones, and that's because so many Rhoynish came. So it's very, very similar to that Moorish invasion of Iberia. So George is referencing multiple stages of history in the same area with all these names, essentially. I guess that's the way to say it.
Yeah. And we also see this conflation of how a refugee problem can also be can be conflated into an invasion, like what we see happening in Europe. Now, in the case, like we just read, with the case of Nymeria, 8 out of 10 are women. So it is mostly women and children. So this becomes, I guess can be viewed as more of a legitimate refugee situation, as opposed to what's going on now, where a lot of the right-wing talking points bring up how many of the refugees coming to Europe are military-age fighting men who, in their view, should be fighting to, not running away, should be fighting to reclaim their home instead of trying to get into Europe.
Which is a nice sentiment, but of course, as we know, then you have to get into what trade policies and international agreements in previous wars, led to the destabilized situation where everyone's coming from. And that gets into the whole tangle of history. But
yeah, exactly. And then we start going back decades and decades and decades because, like Tyrion said, we're all puppets dancing on the strings of our forefathers.
But I think you're right to bring up this contrast between different ways that you can look at immigrants. You can look at it as something that can make your nation stronger, or something that can, who are these foreigners taking our jobs, And of course, I live in the United States. The United States is literally built up from wave of immigrants from Europe, right? Not just the original colonists. I mean, it continues to this day. And there was, specifically, if you go back in history, there's the Irish came over, the Italians came over, the Germans came over during different periods of time, right? Most of us were raised in school to believe, Tim, I know I was, I don't know about you, but that the United States essentially became strong because we're incorporating elements of all these different cultures, and we're all banding together and they're all brave people seeking out. They're not the people content to suffer. They're the people that are, getting up and seeing what's over the next horizon to try to make a better life for themselves and their children. And so our nation is the melting pot of all these people. So you see some of those same themes here with Martell's attitude versus some of the other people that were like, like, oh, who are these Rhoynish? Martell's like, well, they're my new friends. That's who. And now we have 10 times the forces.
Yeah, like, I know how my family came over. My Irish side came over during the potato famine, so we blame the British. And the German side of my family came over here during the Weimar years, during the German Depression, so we blame the British. I'm always going to take a crack. The Irish in me will never not take a crack at the British.
Well, they deserve it. So basically, we went over most of these correlations here. But also, Charles turns out to mean free man. So it's probably accidental that Charles Martell could mean hammer of the free men, which is very close to hammer of the first men, which is just what the hammer of the waters was. That's probably a coincidence. But it's not a coincidence that he chose the name Martell for a house that's living right next to the arm of Dorne where the hammer of waters was dropped, and that the hammer of the waters was dropped supposedly to halt an invasion, which is what Charles Martell is famous for. So I believe we've made the point. And let's go ahead and finish before we do Othello, Tim. Let's actually get back to the text here and talk about the conquest of Dorne, because this is pretty fun.
Yeah, I think the British. I see the Brits. I think the British chat members right now. The no Irish need apply posts.
Well, first of all, I have British and Welsh ancestry, and I have this British mustache, so I think I'm qualified to say that the British. It's been some colonization, chaps, and so karma and all that. That's all I'm going to say. Just leave it there. A little bit of poking fun. We can probably I shouldn't say we, but
it's done
y'all.
with love.
You'll be all right.
Yeah, is that the royal we? You got them.
They know what they did. Erica says, "Yeah, the royal we." Yeah.
What did they do?
Yeah, I'm claiming the Welsh Brittonic ancestry as opposed to the Anglo-Saxon ancestry, but I'll get my DNA tested so we can see. I know my mom's family is mostly Italian, and my dad's family is some combination of German and English Welsh. But anyway, the flames lit the coast for 50 leagues.
For 50 leagues, as hundreds of leaking, listing hulks were put to the torch and turned to ash. In the light of their burning, Princess Nymeria named Mors Martell the Prince of Dorne in the Rhoynish style, asserting his dominion over the red sands and the white, and all the lands and rivers from the mountains to the Great Salt Sea. And of course, it's the red and white sands because we got to throw in some weirwood imagery, even with a place without weirwoods. Such supremacy was easier to declare than to achieve, however. Years of war followed as the Martells and their Rhoynar partners met and subdued one petty king after another. No fewer than 6 conquered kings were sent to the wall in golden fetters by Nymeria and her prince, until only the greatest of their foes remained. Yorick Ironwood, the Blood Royal, 5th of his name, Lord of Ironwood, Warden of the Stone Way, Knight of the Wells, King of Red March, King of the Green Belt, and King of the Dornish. Titles.
Real quick, Tim, I've sent the chat on a spiral out. Everyone's like, don't do the DNA testing. Of course, I'm aware that there's not all those companies are reputable. Is there one that is, or are they all bunk? Because I really am curious to get it done. I do know that there is reason to have caution. But if I could, though, if we could table the discussion just so that we don't completely derail it, if anybody's got a recommendation, leave a comment on the video afterwards or something. But yeah, sorry to bring up a strange side topic. Go ahead, Tim.
Let's see. For 9 years, Mors Martell and his allies, amongst them House Fowler of Skyreach, House Toland of Ghost Hill, House Dane of Starfall, and House Uller of the Hellhold, aka all of the cool houses, struggled against Ironwood and his bannermen, the Jordanes of the Tor, the Wills of the Stoneway, together with the Blackmonts, the Corgyles, and many more, in battles too numerous to mention. When Mors Martell fell to Yorick Ironwood's sword in the Third Battle of the Boneway, Princess Nymeria assumed sole command of his armies. 2 more years of battle were required, but in the end, it was Nymeria that Yorick Ironwood bent the knee to, and Nymeria who ruled thereafter from Sunspear.
So now Yorick is another Shakespeare reference, obviously. That's from Hamlet.
Yeah, alas, poor Yorick, I knew him.
And that's Hamlet talking to the skull.
Yep.
So what might be the point? House Ironwood, is this all just like weirwood skull tree symbolism, you think? Probably.
Let's look up Yorick. Yorick's role in Hamlet.
I'm going to look up House Ironwood. I want to see the sigil.
Hamlet, Yorick. Okay, so Yorick is...
Okay, so it's the gate. Black portcullis.
Oh, Yorick is the dead court jester whose skull is exhumed by the first great... There's some patch face symbolism right there. A jester and skulls going around him.
Yeah, that's probably the thing to follow. I was thinking of House Manwoody of Kingsgrave. They're nearby, and they have a skull sigil with a crown. And
Manwoody.
This is all weirwood stuff. Like the grave of a king that is a manwood. That's a tree that looks like a person that is a repository for people with special blood, Green Seer Kings. So that's easy to decode. They are close though.
Their current lord Dagos Manwoody. That's only 1 letter away from Dagon.
Okay, I need to go to Kingsgrave to get the map. Yes, it's not far from Ironwood. God, they have so many pop-ups. Yeah, right here. So that's cool. Thanks, Mod. Oh, Minty rolling in. Thanks, Minty, with all the links. Yeah, we're doing it. We're out here doing it. So back to the tech. That's where we were. Though she married twice more, first to the aged Lord Uller of Hellholt. Why would you marry an old guy from the Hellholt? Like that guy must have been borderline King Ares status, right? Like with the long fingernails and... The Ullers are messed up. Those are messed up people. They're not right. They live by the brimstone. That's suspect. Later, she marries the dashing Sir Davos Dane of Starfall, not wanting to make the same mistake twice. Dashing Davos Dane, the Sword of the Morning. So that's a marriage that makes sense. You know, this is a very powerful figure from the far side of the kingdom. So we are strengthening our tie to House Dane. If we are Martell, that really helps unify everything. So that one really makes sense. I don't know how Lord Uller got in there. But Nymeria herself remained the unquestioned ruler of Dorne for almost 27 years. Her husband serving only as counselors and consorts. She survived a dozen attempts upon her life and threw back 2 invasions by the Storm King Garin the Great and one by King Graydon of the Reach. What? Garin the Great? That's not right. This is only like 1,000 years ago. It wouldn't be Garin the Great. It would have been Garin the 33rd. Yeah, that's got to be a mistake.
Well, Durin or Durandin?
Storm King Garin. That's... Yeah, it must be a typo. It's probably 33rd. I wonder if it, maybe in the wiki it'll say correctly. Go down to her war. No, they just repeat it here. Okay. We'll assume that's a typo. Obviously, the Dornish didn't come to Westeros 8,000 years ago. Timeline falsified, confirmed. Yeah, no, it's a typo. They got me, remember, they got me with that Lady Forlorn Valyrian thing. Like, you can't fool me twice. That's a typo. Okay, back to the text. When at last she died, Tim, pick it up.
This is the last paragraph. When at last she died, it was the eldest of her 4 daughters by Mors Martell who succeeded her, not her son by Davos Dane, for by then the Dornish had come to adopt many of the laws and customs of the Rhoynar, though the memories of Mother Rhoyne and the 10,000 ships were fading into legend.
I think there's a little thing about the green blood. Oh, no. Oh, that'll be in the Dorne section. Cool. Okay, so this is some of the description. We'll go ahead and just read this again real quick. I think we got some of this. Uller is presumed to be the counterpart of Skadi, who would be who Nymeria is representing here. Oh, I forgot that Uller is a Norse figure. That's right. Let's look him up. We don't read the AI summaries, do we, friends? No, we go to Wikipedia. All right, so Uller is a god associated with skiing, although literary attestations of Uller are sparse. Evidence, including relatively ancient place names, evidence from Scandinavia suggests he was a major god in earlier Germanic paganism. Okay. Proto-Germanic Wulus, maybe, appears to have been an important concept of which his name is a reflex. The word appears as this on the 3rd century Thorsberg chap. Okay, that's definitely pretty old. So the Norse theonym Uller derives from Proto-Germanic, which we just read, meaning either servant of... Okay. It is an origin, linguistic sibling of the same origin of the Gothic noun for glory or wealth. Ultimately derives from Proto-Indo-European vultus, sight, gaze, appearance, from the root to see. And so, what does he do? A cunning wizard with magical means of transportation. He was such a cunning wizard that he used certain bone, probably a sledge or similar conveyance, which he had marked with awful spells, whether to cross the seas instead of a vessel, and that by this bone he passed over the waters that barred his way as quickly as by rowing. When Odin was exiled, Uller was chosen to take his place and ruled under the name Odin for 10 years until the true Odin came back. All right. So there's Uller on his skis with his bow. So I guess he's sort of like an inversion, because this guy lives in the desert now. So instead of the god of skiing, he's the god of the Hellholt. Not really. But you were saying Uller is the marries somebody that corresponds to Nymeria. What did she say? Skadi. Who's Skadi? I forget Skadi. She's a Jotun, and she's associated with bow hunting, skiing, winter, and mountains. A lot of times with the Norse gods, when they're paired up, they're going to represent very similar things. She's the daughter of Thiazi, who we know from the story of Idun. Let's see here. I'm not seeing any. Oh, here it is. Okay. Some place names in Scandinavia refer to Skadi. Scholars have theorized a potential connection between Skadi and the god Ullr, who is also associated with Skeeting, a particular relationship with the Jotun Loki. I don't know what that has to do with Nymeria, though. What does Skadi do? Etymology, attestations. Shining bride of the gods. Well, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But that name Ullr is definitely taken from Norse myth, so there's some reason why he is using it. I'm just not sure. It all just seems inversion. So instead of frost giants, these are people that live in the desert. But
I mean, again, just like with the red and white sands, is this just a way of trying to inject some northern themes into a southern desert?
yeah,
Possibly. But skiing's not really applying to the desert unless we're skiing down some sand dunes.
yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and move on. So, um, deserts of sand, scorpions, blah blah blah. We read all this stuff. Larger and more populous, the Planky town at the mouth of the River Greenblood is perhaps the nearest thing the Dornish have to a city. Though a city with planks instead of streets, where the houses and halls and shops are made from pole boats, barges, and merchant ships, lashed together with the hempen rope and floating on the tide. So if you remember from the Arion chapter, one of her party is named Garin, and he's, of course, named after the Rhoynish Garin, and he's tied to these pole boat people on the Greenblood. So he is of strong Rhoynish ancestry. He is descended from the Rhoynar, who maintained some level of Rhoynish identity even in Dorne, living on their ships that they lashed together. So it's almost like they never stopped the migration. They're like, well, we love the river, so here's our new river. So that's kind of cool. Like, the Rhoynar do have this little part to play in that chapter. And of course, when they get to the pole boat, it's an ambush. But there's a lavish description of the pole boat. So that's pretty cool.
There is a sidebar about the Dornish rivers, is that's the Torrentine, the Brimstone, and the Greenblood, if that was what you're looking for.
Kinda, yeah. Where is it? Go ahead.
There you
Right
go.
there.
Most Dornish rivers are in full flood only after the rare and dangerous rainstorms. The rest of the year, they are dry gullies. In all of Dorne, only 3 rivers flow day and night, winter and summer, without ever going dry. The Torrentine are rising high in the western mountains, and this is where the Torrentine is where Starfall is. Starfall is actually an island in the middle of the river. Plunges down to the sea in a series of rapids and waterfalls, howling through canyons and crevices with a sound like the roar of some great beast. Rising from the mountain springs, its waters are sweet and pure, but dangerous to cross, save by bridge, and impossible to navigate. The Brimstone is a far more placid stream, but its cloudy yellow waters stink of sulfur, and the plants that grow along its banks are strange and stunted things. So we're getting close to like a river ash territory here. Yellow's halfway there to green. Of the men who live along those self-same banks we shall not speak. But the Greenblood's waters, if sometimes muddy, are healthful for plant and animal alike, and farms and orchards crowd the river banks for hundreds of leagues. Moreover, the Greenblood and its vassals, the Vaith and the Scourge, are navigable by boat almost to their source, if shallow and plagued by sandbars in places, and therefore serve as the principality's chief artery for trade.
And so here is your stony, sandy and salty Dornish. So I I think they break that down too. Is that going to be? Yes.
Yeah, it's right under the next page. Yep. From such origins did the three distinct types of Dornishmen we know today arise. The young dragon, King Daeron the First, gave them the names we know them by in his book, The Conquest of Dorne. Stony Dornishmen, Sandy Dornishmen, and Salty Dornishmen, he named them. The Stony Dornishmen were the mountain folk, fair of hair of skin, mostly descended from the first men in the Andals. The Sandy Dornishmen dwell in the deserts and river valleys, with their skin burned brown beneath the blazing Dornish sun. The Salty Dornishmen of the coasts, dark-haired and lithe and olive-skinned, have the queerest customs and the most Rhoynish blood. When Princess Nymeria came ashore in Dorne, most of her Rhoynar preferred to remain close to the sea that had been their home for so long, even after Nymeria burned their ships.
So, that's very cool. And now the name Nymeria. I got two ideas about this. So I just talked about the Tua a day and how they came to Ireland and burned their ships, right? Mm-hmm. Well, they are descendants from somebody called Nemed. Nemed is this great figure in Irish history. He's also the father of the Firbolg, who the Tua a day have to fight against. So Nemed could be part of the inspiration for Nymeria. But then there's also a Prince Nymor associated with Atlantis, I believe. Does that sound correct to you, Tim? Narmor, is that it? Yes.
The Submariner?
Oh, well, this is from Marvel, but they're pulling
George's
off
comic.
of Greek myth. Can I get the actual?
I mean, George is a big comic geek, so.
I might be screwing this up, but yeah, maybe George just pulled it from Marvel. That's true, actually. Is it? I guess this will tell me if it was. Maybe not. Maybe my brain totally scrambled that and made it authentic. And it's just a Marvel character. I mean, Atlantis is made up anyway, so I guess what's the difference, right? Plato is just fiction from a different era. He came up with Namor by writing down noble-sounding names backwards and thought that Roman Namor looked the best. Okay, so it's Roman backwards.
There you go, fishbulb.
But the thing is, it makes sense because Atlantis, not only is Atlantis a fabled land that was destroyed and its survivors had to flee, kind of like Nymeria, like Atlantis is an aquatic-based, rich, fabled civilization of the Dawn Age. You know, like their cities had the canals. So they're very aquatic-based culture, and that's kind of similar to the Rhoynar, sort of. The Rhoynar feel loosely Mediterranean, Greek, Egyptian era, so, yeah. Now, George has taken a lot of stuff from Marvel, so... Yeah, my mistake was thinking that Marvel took it from Greek myth. The name is made up for Marvel, but it is part of Atlantis. I had that right. So, could be. What does he do in the story? I guess I should look at that real quick. Mutant son of a human sea captain and the princess of a mythical undersea kingdom of Atlantis. Narmor possesses the super strength and aquatic abilities of the Homo mermanus race, as well as the mutant ability of flight. Okay.
Merman.
And so, Mermanus. So that's cool. That's kind of, again, he's the child of these two cultures coming together. And so, what did Nymeria do? She wed Mors Martell, and, so there you go. That's fun. Always more. Let's see if there's anything else in the Dornish history. Obviously, breaking, we did all that. Kingdoms of the First Men, we don't need to read that. We did that. The Andals, we did that. We don't need to talk about Sword of the Morning. So yeah, there's a little more Rhoynar. The Martells ruled their modest domains for hundreds of years before Nymeria and her 10,000 ships made landfall near the Shadow City. The story of how Nymeria took Mors Martell as her lord husband, burning her ships and binding her Rhoynar to his house, heart, hand, and honor, has been told elsewhere. We need not tell it again here, nor will we repeat the old familiar tale of battles won and lost, alliances made and broken. Suffice it to say that the wealth and knowledge of the Rhoynar brought with them to Westeros, together with the ambition of Lord Mors and the indomitable will of Nymeria of the Rhoyne, enabled the Martells to greatly expand their power as they defeated one lord and petty king after another until they at last toppled even the Ironwoods and united all of Dorne, not as a kingdom, but as a principality. For Mors and Nymeria never named themselves as king and queen, preferring the titles prince and princess, after the fashion of the fallen city-states of the Rhoyne. Their descendants continued this tradition until the present day, even whilst defeating many a rival and proving themselves against the Storm Kings and the Kings of the Reach alike. In the songs, Nymeria is said to have been a witch and a warrior. Neither of these claims is true. Though she did not bear arms in battle, she led her soldiers on many battlefields, commanding them with cunning and skill. So I would push back against this. There is a tradition of warrior women amongst the Rhoynar, so she's going to have at least a little bit of basic training, even if she didn't go all the way. And she survived a dozen assassination attempts. Do you think she survived by just standing there and going, "Oh no, I hope my gods save me"? Like, she probably's got a couple moves.
Yeah, it's like, is a general any less of a soldier if they're not in the thick, just because they're not in the thick of, because they're commanding and not in the thick of it?
Yeah, and maybe she was a witch. Lots of Rhoynish women were. So why couldn't she be? Hard to say. But it was a wisdom she passed along to her heirs, who would themselves command the hosts when she grew too aged and infirm. And though none matched Nymeria's feat of sending 6 captive kings in golden fetters to the wall, her heirs succeeded in keeping Dorne independent against the rival kings north of the mountains, and keeping it whole against the rancorous, hot-tempered lords of mountain and desert whom they ruled. Will you pick it up?
House Martell has guided Dorne for 700 years, raising its great towers at Sunspear, seeing the Shadow City and the Planky Town rise, and defeating all those who threatened its dominion. The names of the 6 kings who sent... Yeah, there's a sidebar. We can maybe come back.
No, this is cool. Yorick of House Ironwood. The Blood Royal, the richest and most powerful of the Dornish kings. Vorian of House Dane, of course, the Sword of the Evening, the greatest knight in all of Dorne. Got the sharpest sword anyway. Garrison of House Fowler, the blind king, aged and sightless, yet still feared for his cunning. Sent a blind man to the wall. It's a little much. Might as well just give him a tower house, to become a monk in or something. Lucifer of House Dryland, last of his ilk, king of the Brimstone, lord of Hellgate Hall. Like the cut of his jib. Benedict of House Blackmont, who worshipped a dark god and was said to have power to transform himself into a vulture of enormous size. So he's a skin changer. With a vulture statue that creeps people out. Albin of House Manwoody, a troublesome madman who claimed dominion over the Red Mountains. A troublesome madman, okay. I couldn't possibly wield a spear. I just had my nails done, not Nymeria. Okay, and then so... the Stony Dornish have the most in common with these north of the mountains and are the least touched by the Rhoynish custom. This has not made them closer allies to the Marcher Lords or the Lords of the Reach. However, on the contrary, it has been said that the Mountain Lords have a history as savage as that of the mountain clans of the Vale, having for thousands of years warred with the Reach and the Stormlands as well as each other. Let's see. If the ballads tell the brave skirmishes with cruel Dornishmen in the marches, it is largely to do with the Lords of Blackmont and Kingsgrave, of Will and Skyreach, and of Ironwood as well. The wardens of the Stoneway remain the proudest and most powerful of House Martell's vassals, and theirs has been an uneasy relationship at best. The sandy Dornishmen are more Rhoynish and are used to the harsh way of life in the desert. The rivers of Dorne are paltry when compared to the Mander or the Trident, but they bring water enough to irrigate fields and sustain villages and towns. Outside of them, however, men live in different fashion, moving from desert oasis to desert oasis, Lisan al-Gaib, crossing the sands with the aid of what wells they know of in the midst of the wastes, raising their children alone with their goats and their horses and sandworms. I added that part. It is the sandy Dornish who are the chief breeders of the famed sand steeds, considered the most beautiful horses in the Seven Kingdoms. Though light-boned and unable to easily bear the weight of a knight in armor, they are swift and tireless, able to run through a day and night with no more than a few drinks of water. The Dornish love their sand steeds almost as much as they love their children. And King Daron would remark in the Conquest of Dorne that the Knight of Spotswood stabled his sand steeds in his own hall. There you go. Go ahead with the sidebar. Yeah.
Before Nymeria came, the kings of Ironwood were the most powerful house in all of Dorne, far greater than the Martells of the time. They ruled half of Dorne, a fact that, to this day, the Ironwoods let no one forget. Make Ironwood great again. In the centuries after House Martell rose to the rule of Dorne, the Ironwoods have been the house likeliest to rebel and have done so several times, Dornish Boltons. Even after Prince Meryn Martell united Dorne with the Iron Throne, this habit remained. Lords of Ironwood rode for the Black Dragon in no less than 3 of the 5 Blackfire rebellions.
And that'll be a good transition into Othello, but first let's just read this bit about the salty Dornish.
Sure. The salty Dornish, the scions of the Rhoynar, lost their mother tongue over the centuries, though that tongue still marks the way the Dornish speak the common tongue, stretching some sounds, rolling others, and lilting still others in odd places. Dornish speech has been described by some as charming, and by others, the Marchers chiefly and unfairly, as incomprehensible. But more than that, the Rhoynar brought with them their customs and their laws, which the Martells then spread throughout Dorne. So in Dorne, alone among the 7 kingdoms, it is the eldest child, man or woman, who will inherit, and not just the eldest son. Great ladies and famous princesses abound, and are the subject of songs and tales as much as the great knights and princes. There are other customs besides that mark the Dornish as different. They are not greatly concerned if a child is born in wedlock or out of it, especially if the child is born to a paramour. Many lords and even some ladies have paramours, chosen for love and lust rather than for breeding or alliance. And when it comes to matters of love, that a man might lie with another man or a woman with another woman is likewise not cause for concern. While the Septons have often wished to shepherd the Dornishmen to the righteous path, they have had little effect. Even the fashions are different in Dorne, where the climate favors loose layered robes and the food is richly spiced, ready to burn the mouth with dragon peppers mixed with drops of snake venom. Standing apart from the rest of the Dornish, salty or sandy or stony alike, are the orphans of the green blood, who wept when Nymeria burned their ships. From their ruins they made their pole boats to ply the green blood and dream of the day they could return to Mother Rhoyne. Of pure Rhoynish blood, they still speak their tongue amongst themselves. It is said, though, in secret, after the 3 successors of Nymeria's grandson, Prince Mors II, attempted to forbid it. These successors were also known as the Red Princes, though 2 were princesses, and their reigns were marked by wars both within and without Dorne. They created the Planky Town as a gathering place, lashing together the pole boats and ferries. It grew from there, and in time the princes raised a citadel nearby to guard it as more and more ships from the free cities found it a convenient harbor. Mute it.
That's pretty cool history. Sounds like a cool place to hang out, frankly. Like, it's a little bit of, like, maybe New Orleans bayou vibes. Like, anything goes. Like, the gambling's probably really good in Planky Town. You know?
It sounds like, for me, I can't stand the heat, so for me it'd be a place I'd like to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there year round.
Yeah, a little bit of like Venice, but humbler. It doesn't have the pretentiousness, if you will, of an old European city. I was thinking about symbolism too. Cast out of the river, their ships are burned. So these are green orphans. These would be the others of some kind. And they've rebuilt a wooden place to live in the sea, but it's not the same by any means. So it's like a reconstruction weirwood net a little bit or something like that, salvaged. Maybe this is just referring to the children of the forest making the best of things after Azor Ahai broke the weirwood net, sort of lashing the pole boats together, something like that. But an example of the differing Dornish laws and attitudes due to the influence of the Rhoynar may be found curiously in the last days of the Dance of the Dragons, from Archmaester Gildane's history concerning Gaiman Palehair's brief reign. So this is a moment in the Dance of the Dragons when Rhaenyra has fled the city and no one's taken it over, and King's Landing is lawless for like a month. So one decree after another came down from the House of Kisses, where the child king had his seat, Gaiman Palehair. Each decree more outrageous than the last. Gaiman decreed that girls should henceforth be equal with boys in a matter of inheritance, that the poor be given bread and beer in times of famine, and that men who had lost limbs in war must afterward be fed and housed by whichever lord they had been fighting for when the loss took place. What is this madness? This is commie bullshit, Tim.
Communism.
No, I'm kidding. Everyone should take care of their troops when they go to war for their nation. That seems basic. In any case, Gaiman decreed that husbands also don't send your troops out to kill people on behalf of your nation if you can help it. But Gaiman decreed that husbands who beat their wives should themselves be beaten, irrespective of what the wives had done to warrant such a chastisement. That's, some of them, B words be deserving that. Smackdown says the maester, I guess. They didn't even consider what the wives had done to provoke their beatings. It's crazy. Lunacy. These edicts were almost certainly the work of a Dornish hua named Sylvana Sand, repeatedly the paramour of the king's mother Essie, if Mushroom is to be believed. So,
A, she was a hua. B, she was a hoa.
just a little maesterly patriarchy for you there.
If we want true equality, that means equal rights and equal lefts.
Pretty funny stuff. George is amusing with these little commentaries. So, all right, Tim, let's do this. Let's talk about Othello.
Okay, so yes, because we did mention Dornish fighting for the Blackfires. Othello, so when we think of Moors, that leads me to Othello, because Othello being a Moor is a huge driving plot point of this play. Oh, and if you want to know see more Shakespearean influence over Song of Ice and Fire, you should also head to my channel. My most recent video that I've put out is about the influence of Macbeth on House of the Dragon's Harrenhal arc. So there's a lot of Shakespeare in A Song of Ice and Fire when you're willing, if you just got to look for it. But here, Othello is thematically in line with the personal and political issues that would lead to the first Blackfire Rebellion. So Othello takes place mainly in Venice and Cyprus. Those are our settings. Othello is a noble Moor, so he's of North African descent, and he is a general in the Venetian military. He elopes with a woman named Desdemona, who is the daughter of a Venetian senator. His closest confidants are his friend Michael Cassio, his most beloved captain, and his ensign, which is a junior ranked officer by the name of Iago. But Iago is putting on a front. Iago is the villain of our story. He is not a friend or an ally. He secretly hates Othello. Reasons for this include Othello's race, his role as a subordinate to him, Othello's promotion of Cassio to captain ahead of him, and a belief that Othello has cuckolded him by sleeping with his wife Amelia. So when you ask Iago, why do you hate Othello, he has just a whole list of reasons. Iago schemes with a Venetian nobleman named Rodrigo. So when we go back to what we had said about sad Rodrigo and happy Tariq holding the sword, well, here we have sad Rodrigo and happy Othello. Othello has Desdemona, the woman that Rodrigo loves.
So this is Shakespeare doing the same thing that George Martin is doing, taking a name from history that he is drawing from to fashion his story and pulling that name from history into the story as a signal to the reader about what history they're referring to, kind of.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So that's why that was cool to bring up the Tariq thing, because I did not realize that Roderick also would, because I saw the name Roderick, but I guess in other settings his name was Rodrigo. So yeah, Iago schemes with Rodrigo, who is in love with Desdemona. So Iago is manipulating Rodrigo, knowing his vulnerabilities. Rodrigo follows Iago, believing that Iago will help him in his quest to court and woo Desdemona once Othello is removed. And Iago's schemes revolve around gaslighting Othello into believing that Desdemona has been unfaithful and has been carrying on an affair with Cassio. So what I notice is that this, in a way, mirrors the story of Daemon Blackfyre and his desire for his half-sister, Daenerys. So the way that Dorne is brought into the fold and into the Seven Kingdoms is not through conquest, it is through a marriage pact. It is the marriage of Daenerys Targaryen, sister to King Daeron the Good, to Prince Meryn Martell. Similarly, Daeron himself had been wed to Meryn's older sister Mariah Martell to secure a peace treaty years earlier. So then
eventually Maekar marries a Dane, and that's
yeah, but we have two marriage pacts. So Daeron the First, the young dragon, launches his conquest of Dorne. He gets killed. Baelor, after doing his walk of atonement and saving Aemon the Dragon Knight from the crow's cage, he is able to bring peace through a marriage pact, and that is by marrying his I think it would be his nephew, if I'm remembering the family tree correctly. Daeron would be his nephew. Yeah. So he marries his nephew off, and that secures the peace. And then it's through a second marriage, second Martell Targaryen marriage, that Dorne is brought into the fold. Anywho.
And that's Daenerys and Mors.
And that's Daenerys and Meryn, yeah. So Daenerys is married off to Meryn Martell. This brings them to the fold. But Daemon, it is said that Daemon loved Daenerys himself. Daemon competes in a tourney celebrating Meryn and Daenerys' wedding. He goes up against Baelor Breakspear. So this is his nephew, but Baelor is also the crown prince, the eldest son of Daeron the Good. The two would break several lances against one another before being defeated in the final tilt. And I put defeated in quotation marks because, according to Sir Eustace Osgrey, Daemon was the true victor. In real world history, tourneys such as this, when you have a draw like this, it would fall on the highest office holder in attendance to declare a winner. Considering this is the wedding for the king's own sister, King Daeron would be there himself. So he is the highest office holder, who's higher than the king himself. So for political purposes, it makes sense that Daeron would have declared his son and heir as champion over his bastard half-brother. But we know that Daemon Blackfyre was susceptible to flattery. So one of the ideas is, like, possibly you might have had a bunch of people coming up to Daemon being like, yo, you got robbed. You should have won that tournament, trying to get on his good side. Also, considering that this was the wedding tourney for the woman he desired, think if Daemon had won, he would have declared Daenerys the queen of love and beauty. And that would have been a scandal, much the way Rhaegar declaring Lyanna Stark was a scandal. So that's another reason, too, why, of course, Daeron is going to name his son Crown Prince. He knows even if he did feel that Daemon did the better job, the potential of what Daemon might do afterward would be an insult to the Martell. And we're carefully scripting this to try and get it. We don't need my bastard half-brother throwing a wrench into it.
And to me, Bitter Steel is the one that has the strongest Iago vibes, kind of.
Yeah.
Because he's the one
Yeah.
who basically poisons Daemon Blackfire's ear.
Yeah, so Daemon is more of a Rodrigo figure because Daemon is susceptible to manipulation the way that Rodrigo was susceptible to Iago. So yeah, Daemon's a sucker for flattery. Those who had fallen out of favor or gained influence. And then, not only do you have that, but then you also have when Daeron the Good takes over and he starts cleaning house, getting rid of all the lick spittles that had gotten in their point of power from the corruption of their father. Because before that, when Aegon the Unworthy was in charge, we'll offer up a daughter and you'll get whatever political position you want. You'll get whatever holding you want. So it said that Aegon the Unworthy may have led Daemon to believe that he could take multiple wives, including Daenerys. And it is notable that a lot of Daemon's initial support comes from Marcher Lords, like we see in the Mystery Knight later on, when the second Blackfire Rebellion, the Peaks are always all in. And they are a Marcher Lord house. And then we get our two sort of Iago figures. So Marcher Lords who are disgruntled with the Dornish inclusion, as well as others with their own axe to grind. Bitter Steel and Fireball. Quentin Ball is promised a promotion by Aegon the Unworthy to the Kingsguard. This is similar to Othello. He does not, but it is not honored by Daeron II. When a Kingsguard slot becomes available, Quentin Ball reminds King Daeron of the promise his father made. Daeron says, no, I'm not going to do that. And so he passes up Quentin Ball in favor of another. So this is like Othello promoting Cassio over Iago. And then, of course, we have Aegor Rivers' Bittersteel, his hatred for Bloodraven and jealousy over Shiera Seastar. And in that sense, the Blackfire Rebellions become a larger scale war born from this Bracken Blackwood feud.
So basically, like, again, it's just these ties within the story. So this is not the period of Dornish history that we're mostly covering. This is the Dornish involvement in the Blackfire Rebellion. It's mostly just the straight up Blackfire Rebellion. But the Blackfire Rebellion, of course, is started because of the Dornish controversy. That's a large part of it, right? Like you said.
Yeah.
One branch of House Targaryen is marrying into Martell, and the ones that don't become proxies for the Westerosi lords that don't like the Dornish. And so, since George is drawing all of that from Othello, and Othello involves the Moors, he's tied it to the Dornish. So I don't know where that sentence...
Yeah.
Nobody tried to diagram that last sentence, but the point is, George gives us these call-outs from like where he's pulling stuff from. And this all makes pretty good sense since Dorne is tied to the Moors, and the Moors are such a big part of the story. So that was a nice find, Tim.
Yeah, it's also an example of no good deed goes unpunished, right? Like the Targaryens they couldn't take Dorne with Aegon the Conqueror. They couldn't take Dorne with Daeron the Young Dragon. They are able to secure it through peaceful means. So finally, the Seven Kingdoms are united. The realm is united. But even then, that still brings its own set of problems. Marcher Lords who are disgruntled, who look at, we've been fighting them for years, and now we've been fighting them for centuries, and now you expect us to just make nice? Like, no, old rivalries don't go away overnight like that. And then, of course, there are the... as we saw in the Sworn Sword, Eustace Osgrey brings up these points, a lot of things that the Dornishmen are seeing as getting a lot of concessions, that they're getting too good of a deal in this. They get to retain the title of prince and princess. So all these lords are like, well, how come he gets to be a prince? Why don't I get to be a prince? Why do I just get to be a lord?
Why don't they even have to like tithe so many young boys and girls like the pirates made them do? Come on.
Yeah. And it seems like he lets Dornish men into the court, so now there's like this whole thing of like they're getting in here, like they're taking our jibs, they're taking our positions, and of course everyone, and Daeron swept house, got rid of all the corrupt officials from his dad, and that's bad enough for them. But then to add insult to injury for them, and then he replaced us with Dornishmen, the Fiend. So you see, like it just. One problem compounds upon another. And what should have been one of Daeron the Good's like greatest moments, greatest political maneuvers of bringing Dorne into the fold, leads to civil war.
Yeah, and of course, you know how it is with these things. There's always multiple factors, so it's like a combination of Dornish antipathy, but also just people that were put out of power, like Tim said, when the house cleaning was done. And now you had connections to the old guy, but not the new guy. So, and the people who had connections to the old guy were the ones who were taking advantage of the corruption of Aegon the Unworthy. So these aren't the best people. Of course, they're eager to, plunge the realm into the destruction of war in order to gain power. Of course, they're willing to do that. So.
Yeah, and that's what makes Aegon the Unworthy legitimizing all of his bastards such a huge problem, because now anyone who has a problem with Daeron the Good has dozens of bastards of their choosing to try and, hitch their wagon to. And here's Daemon Blackfire. He's a champion. He's the youngest person ever knighted. He has the Targaryen sword Blackfire. He's Targaryen on both sides. He's handsome. He's charismatic. He's, we read the Sworn Sword. We know about Sir Eustace Osgrey's man crush on him, but like this is the perfect Targaryen, and he's easy to manipulate. Just butter him up. It's almost like his dad again.
Yeah, the stories really are similar. Just listening to, you outlined it for me yesterday, but listening to you go over it again here today, it really is similar. I mean, the dynamic of and even extending to Baelor Breakspear and the continued Dornish prejudice against him. Mm-hmm. He looks Dornish.
Looks Dornish. He doesn't have traditional Targaryen features, but Daemon Blackfire does.
And so this is a similar type of situation you have anytime there's a culture clash. So very cool. Nice cherry on top. Thanks for adding that, Tim. And look, we did do less than 5 hours today. I told you it wasn't going to be quite as bad. So that's cool. Nice, smooth, svelte, trim 3-hour stream here. And even though it is a little short, I'm sorry for letting y'all down. Like I was saying at the beginning, it's possible that you may not be aware of my new video about the Direwolf net, which YouTube did not show a lot of my subscribers for whatever reason. So I've just dropped a link in the chat. And if you didn't see that, then good news. 45 minutes of psychic direwolf stuff and more than a few jokes about the GMO Grey Wolves. Abomination. So check that one out if you didn't. Make sure you're subscribed to Grey Waste Tim's channel. And you can just click on his name in the description to get to his channel, or type in Grey Waste Tim. He's going to have a new video out this week, which will be about the Bloodstone Emperor's connections to Tim. It's some Lovecraft stuff about the Black Tomb of Nefrin Ka. Tim will explain it in his video, and then he'll give us a short version the following Sunday, where I will let Tim cook. I promise I will let Tim cook. But at least 20 or 30 minutes will go on this, but Tim's going to have the 2-hour version. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there will be a reference point, so I'm not repeating everything again. But yes, go subscribe to my channel, please. You can find just Grey Waste Tim. I am Grey Waste Tim. The channel is Grey Waste Tim. If you want more Shakespearean, then yes, please check out my last video, the Scottish play and the Dragon Show about Macbeth. And then, yes, my upcoming video sometime this week, definitely before Sunday, will be the Emperor and the Pharaoh, Blackstone and Bloodstone, and I'll dive into the whole Bloodstone Black Pharaoh connection.
And I will watch it and digest some of that, and then we'll incorporate that into our much larger Bloodstone Emperor Greenseer presentation, which is coming your way next Sunday, unless something changes. But that is the plan. And other than that, I will just say thanks so much for joining me. If you want to refresh this video when we're done and leave a comment, that would be great. That helps the video get seen. And check out my Direwolf net. I will not have a new video this week, but I'll be working on something for next week. So look forward to that Bloodstone Emperor stream and check out Tim's video this week. And that's it. Thanks for joining me. Love y'all. And I did have one closing thought on Nymeria, which is just that, again, this is really the thing that should be adapted. It could just be either an awesome series of movies covering all these different segments. The first Rhoynar, the struggle with Valyria, the move to Sothroyos, the attempts to form these colonies, and the Summer Islands part, and then the unification. It's like 4 or 5 seasons of a TV show or 4 or 5 movies. It could be so epic. I've said many times, Nymeria is she's the only other Daenerys character, like, in this whole world, like a figure that powerful and transformative. And the thing about Nymeria is, like, she compares a little bit to Moses. I tried to think about other warrior queens, but she's not really like Boudica. She's not really like Cleopatra, who's a Greek, queen of Egypt. It's just not. Nymeria is really a unique character that George has fashioned. So I truly hope to see her on the screen one day, I guess is all I'm trying to say. Just banging that old drum. And that idea originally came from a Shea of History of Westeros, to give credit. She was the one who made a video about this many years ago, but I just think it's a great idea. I do think it's just such an obvious thing to adapt. So yeah, hopefully Night of the Seven Kingdoms will go well. Hopefully George and Ryan Condal will, be friends again, and all this stuff will be rolling on, and George will finish Winds of Winter, and then
hopefully we'll get more word on some of these shows. Seems like we don't hear anything, don't know if they've been scrapped or if they're stuck in production hell or what's going on. But
it's whatever happens with George's books, though, as long as HBO is adapting stuff that he's done, like Nymeria's Conquest it's perfect. There's the outlines of a great story, but lots of room to fill in the blanks with surprises and things. Who knows how the Third Turtle War really went. So anyways, guys, thanks again for coming, and see you next week. Thanks, Tim. Cheers, everyone.
Good night.